We may soon possibly start a feature here at the Voice of College Football. This could be possibly a daily feature, or it could be a weekly feature where we highlight the dumbest fan base of that particular day or week. I'm considering it. And the winner today, based again, not on all of media, social media, and elsewhere, but based on my experience, based on my personal experience on social media today, dumbest fan base is awarded to Florida State. Okay, now hang on right there, because I got blasted on social media today, and this is how it all started. And in the meantime, you know that you can grab the link in the comments section that we have dropped to call the show. And of course, we're going to highlight our topic tonight, which is going to be which school out of the new entries into conferences in 2023, and then, of course, the big jump for the Big Four in 2024 to the SEC and the Big Ten, which ones will fare the best? Who will fare the best? We've got a number of entries into Conference USA, the American Conference, and of course, the four entering the Big 12 in 2023. And then looking ahead to the mammoth fall of 2024. And wow, it is going to be good. USC, UCLA to the Big 10, and Oklahoma, Texas to the Big 12. So this was quite amusing today on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, if you're not on Twitter, I do not recommend going on Twitter. Unless you're just going to follow me, then you're allowed. No. But I don't recommend going on Twitter if you're not already subjected to the cesspool on Twitter. But if you're already on Twitter, hey, follow me on Twitter. We'll have a good time talking college football. So what happened was that I was responding to a post, a college football Twitter account that I must follow. They probably follow me because it's my own personal guideline that I don't follow anyone who doesn't follow me. There's like 3 exceptions. All right, so I saw this post, and the question was posed, which team that has a championship drought, and they listed the championship droughts of all the prominent programs, and we're talking, of course, national championships. Which one is most likely to win a national championship first? Most likely. So that's a key term there. Most likely. Nobody's making a definitive declaration that so-and-so will win a national championship first. Okay, so there's a number of schools out there that have some level of championship droughts. I don't know if I can really consider Florida State to have a championship drought since they won a national championship in 2013, Auburn in 2010, and on down the road. It's been since 1986 for Penn State, and so forth and so on. All the big teams outside of Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, those were really the only ones that were taken off the table because they've won during the college football playoff era. That's really what it came down to. What schools have not won during the college football playoff era? It could have been phrased in that way, that are most likely to win a championship first. And I think it's a difficult question to answer. You can make a case for Florida State. You can make a case for Texas. You can make a case for Penn State, USC. You can make a case for all sorts of schools out there. Beyond that, you can actually make a case for, as bad as they are right this second, you can make a case for Auburn. All right. So, I wasn't going to do 48 minutes of research to prepare for this answer. I'm just responding to a post. And I believe I said Texas 1, Penn State 2, Notre Dame 3, Florida State 4. I believe were my top 4. And then I went on from there with Auburn and others. Oh my goodness. I didn't hear anything from any Penn State fans because I put them behind Texas. I did not hear anything from any Notre Dame fans because I placed them behind Texas and Penn State. I didn't hear anything from Oregon fans, Washington fans, USC fans even. I didn't have USC in the top 3 or 4. I heard nothing from USC fans. I only heard from Florida State fans that were telling me how stupid I am, that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I know nothing. Oh, my word. It was a freaking Twitter post that I was responding to with just a haphazard shot in the dark kind of answer. And I was not disrespecting your team or your program. And I even said in my response, before all the vitriol hit me, I responded in my initial post, this is a very difficult choice. And there is just a slight difference between these programs in my estimation. And I even stated you could put any of the 6 or 7 schools in any order, and I could make a case for any of them. I was extremely clear to say, it's not like I said, Texas is going to win a national championship first and nobody else has a chance. No, I said there are a number of teams, and you could make a case for any of them. And the only fan base I heard from were about 9 or 10 Florida State fans. No other fan base responded. And I know that I'm not just followed by Florida State fans, but the other fan bases, for some reason, those particular fans actually were able to read and decipher that, number one, this is not a big deal. Number two, he said, this is a difficult answer. He also said, this is just a slight difference that I see between these programs, and I could order them in any way and make a case for any of them. However, the morons that responded from the Florida State fan base was unbelievable. And so then I put out another tweet that really got him riled up, and I knew it would. So I'm just pressing buttons is all I'm doing at that point. And I said, dumb fan base of the day goes to Florida State. But I put in parentheses, if this does not apply to you, take no offense to it, because it doesn't apply to everyone. Do you know what? I will make a statement that I am more sure of than just about any possible statement that I could make concerning college football. You know what it is? Every fan base has stupid fans. It's just the way it is. We're people. We have smart fans. We have delusional fans. We have overly optimistic fans. We have overly pessimistic fans. We have delusional fans. We have fans that have no idea what a football is, basically. We have all sorts of fans in, you know what? Every fan base. For as unique as most fan bases think they are, and I know that they do, and I admire their pride and their sense of identity. I admire that to a certain extent, that they think that they're truly unique. But when it really comes down to it, every fan base is the same. Every fan base is the same. They've got their portion of knowledgeable fans, delusional fans, arrogant fans, pessimistic fans. They all exist in every fan base. I even noted to these Florida State fans who were attacking me for being stupid, moron, don't know what I'm talking about, which, of course, my standard response now is to then send an invitation to the show. I will gladly discuss any of these things with anyone. There has probably been 52 invitations that I have sent to various people who want to trade barbs on social media back and forth. And at a certain point, I realized, number one, this is a waste of time. Even if I have nothing to do today, even if I'm on vacation or I don't have a care in the world and I've got nothing to do, this is still a waste of time. The good Lord above would have me do much better things with my time. But on top of this, I actually run a business and I have more meaningful things to do. One of those things is obviously to interact on social media to some extent, but not to trade barbs with some moron who doesn't know anything and is offended by every slight slight comment. So at some point, I've got to halt and say, okay, we're not getting anywhere with this. You know what? Call my show. Let's talk college football. Do you know who's ever taken me up on that invite? No one. No one has ever taken me up on the invite to talk college football. Can you believe that? It is amazing to see the number of people that are so loud and boastful and so easy to say how stupid somebody is and that you don't know anything. But, with a unique aspect of making that response to me, that's slightly unique. I'm not saying that there aren't other people out there with call in shows, of course. But what is slightly unique about having that interaction with me, I've got a call-in show. You know what? We can talk about it. We don't have to be restricted to 140 characters with no context. You can actually call me and we can discuss it like normal human beings, like adults, like men. We can discuss it. But that's when they scatter. That's when they scatter. We live in a society of clowns and cowards. And yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But you are not among them. You are here at the Voice of College Football, and we appreciate you being here. And that is just a look at my Twitter feed there. And that was, I could not find the original tweet. I don't know why. I'm looking through my responses. So this is my second tweet after I ordered the teams that I felt had the most ability to win a national championship next. And then look what I'm clearly stating here. It's a tough call between those 6 or 7 schools. I could make a case for any of them in just about any order. I'm an Ohio State fan. And if somebody said, if I truly believe that Ohio State is the best team in the country and they have the best chance to win the national championship next year, and somebody's taking some poll saying who's going to win the national championship next year, and I saw people saying Michigan, Georgia, Alabama. Am I bothered by this? No, I don't care. I could care less. And I certainly wouldn't think that those teams have no chance of winning the national championship. How dare anybody say that those teams could possibly win a national championship? And especially if the person said, you know what, this is a tough call to make. I could make a case for anyone. Oh, great. And then I make this statement, and this moron here, Knoll Consultant. This guy should not be consulting a flea. It's pretty easy to tell you haven't done that either. Okay. And then, he's calling into question knowledge. Okay. Who knows more about college football? Call my show. Let's debate. Here's your open invite. Talk to you soon. In the meantime, study up. You better study. No, I'm not going to get that. I'm going to get this. So 3 teams that have one title between them in the last 30 years will win a title before the one that has 3 on its own in the same period. Solid logic. The question had nothing to do with who's won national championships in the past. It has everything to do with who's going to win national championships in the future. So my response was, solid logic is evaluating programs based on their current resources and projecting potential resources and playoff opportunities, not based on 25 years ago. If that were the case, I'd say Nebraska is going to dominate. And it proceeded from there. That is just one example of about a dozen. That's just one example of about a dozen. And it continued on and on and on and on and on from there. We have I got to be fair, Seminole School. said that he agreed with Texas at number 1. They've got all the money, the resources, access to talent. And he's got Florida State at number 2. There's a Florida State fan that put his own team at number 2 in terms of pursuing a national championship for teams that have not won one in the college football playoff era. Yes, just my opinion, which I don't know that needs to be stated. It's all opinion, but some people like to state that. And then there's my comment about dumb fan base of the day, Florida State. You know what? I've said this in the past. I've said dumb fan base of the day, Notre Dame. Dumb fan base of the day, Ohio State. I've seen it all over the place. I'm just having a little fun. Relax. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, that could be a possible future feature here at the Voice of College Football would be dumb fan base of the day. We award the initial one. This is the pilot launch to it, possibly. The pilot launch goes to Florida State. And again, if it doesn't apply to you, take no offense. Move on. Shouldn't be an issue. All right. So Dave says, I can't believe you don't have Michigan on the list. Well, I did not provide the list. It was not my question. Michigan was not on the list. Okay. Or I would put them probably number 1. Probably number 1. Now, if it was about going to the playoff, I would definitely put Michigan number 1. But this is about winning a national championship. Those are two entirely different things. But Michigan was not on the list. So it was not my list. I was just responding. Gregory, are there enough days? And again, I'm just having a little fun. We should be able to realize, like, if I see somebody post, man, those Buckeye fans are idiots today, I'd be like, yeah, they are. There are a bunch of them. That's fine. They're fans. That's okay. That's fine. But then when you actually try to have a logical discussion with them, then that's what drives me nuts, because I would like to have a logical discussion with people and say, oh, you've got Florida State 1. Well, I've got them at number 3. Okay, I get it. These are the reasons why I like Texas and Penn State a little bit more than Florida State. And this is what's wrong with our country right now. Like, people get all bothered and offended. And then I had an onslaught of people who, here's the other issue with what's going on in society now. They all assumed I was talking about Florida State fans ganging up on Miami fans today because of the entire Tyler Van Dyke leaving Miami rumors. So I had people assuming that's what I was talking about. They didn't read the original tweet. They didn't take the time, the 17 seconds that it would have taken to look at the thread to see what the original state. I had people commenting about that and about 3 other things involving Florida State, assuming that's what I was talking about. And I said, I'm not talking or addressing either one of those. You obviously have no idea what I'm talking about, but you're attacking me because you're making an assumption of what I'm talking about. It's just phenomenal. John says that the best part of this Twitter battle was when the Brian Ferentz parody account showed up. Yeah, what was that about? That was somebody tweeted. I saw this from Corey, as I typically do. I get most of my Iowa feedback and most of my Iowa input for the day from Corey. He'll respond to something, or Corey will retweet something I put out, or like something I like, or I'll see it here because I don't follow these people. Corey's got to be the only Iowa person that I follow. So where did this start? Oh my goodness. It's always difficult to find where these things start. This is where I picked it up. Basically, Brian Ferentz said that he's not going to change his approach because, this is a brilliant comment by Brian Ferentz. He's not going to change his offensive approach because of the contract terms. He is going to continue to put his team in the best position to win. Oh, my word. John, I'm glad you brought this one up. Good Lord. Corey and I could do a 2-hour special on this one, or maybe it just gets summarized in 8 seconds. Either path could certainly be traveled. So Brian Ferentz actually said, I'm not changing my approach because of the contract terms. You know what? You shouldn't change your approach because of the contract terms. You're exactly right, Coach Ferentz. Brian, you're exactly right. You should not be changing your approach because of the contract terms. You shouldn't be trying to meet contract terms. You should be trying to build a functional offense. That should be the motivation. I would love, if I was Brian Ferentz, I would be working tirelessly to say, you know what? I want to field an offense this year that I can be proud of, that utilizes the skill and the ability and the effort of our players to hopefully come close to matching the defense and the special teams on this team, so I can actually look those players in the eye and they can see that I'm doing my best and I have formed an offense that is pulling its weight, that is not dragging the team down, but actually pulling together with the team. We are pulling in the same direction. We won't score 85 points a game, but hey, we came off the field against a decent Big Ten team and we scored 31 points and we won the game 31-17. And we actually aided the defense. We didn't try to prohibit you from winning the game. That's what we've been doing for countless years, is we've been prohibiting you from winning the game. And at very best, we just kind of stay out of the way and don't turn over the ball and punt and score a few points, and we win games 17-10. That's at our very best. All right. We will take our first call of the night. We got Brant Weaver on the line. Brant, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. What's up with you?
Not much. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener. Well, I guess not long-time. Probably since 2020.
Nice.
Yeah, late 2020. Anyway, did you see the NFL news today about Jameson Williams and the Detroit Lions?
No.
You did not? Well,
I did not.
He did get caught up in a little bit of the gambling situation. So
look that up right now. Keep going.
He got caught with he was gambling on non-NFL games. So he was gambling on college games, and they said because he was on Detroit Lions facilities that he was still going to grab a 6-game suspension. My thought, or I guess my question is, do you see the NCAA doing anything about college football players, doing anything with college gambling / NFL gambling, or what's your thoughts on what's going on in the gambling world compared to the NCAA?
So the first question I have for you, if you can answer it, how was he caught?
I guess I didn't read that deep into what happened, but I'm sure they have their ways. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I guess I didn't read that deep into it. I just saw the headline and thought, man, that's a killer to the Lions. Obviously, that's for a later day.
Because my thought there is, we know that there are rules and then there are rules. And what I mean by that is that they're all going to be enforced if we find out about them. But there are going to be rules in which we are policing, we are on top of, because we find those to be extremely important to what we do. But then there are other rules that it's not a good look, it's not a good thing, but if it's kind of kept hidden and nobody does something extremely stupid to make us aware of it, We know that it goes on. It's against the rules, but just don't be a moron and we will let it go.
Yeah, I guess I see that side of it too. It's just, the policing, or the NCAA's policing, we both know it is what it is. They have an exponential number compared to what they're trying to catch from the NFL guys. Yeah. So you'll probably never be able to put a stop to it. It just, with the nationwide gambling now, it's got to be tough to stop. And I mean, you're right. I mean, if you can find somebody that maybe this looked funny, this smells funny, should we investigate this? There was an awkward situation. Outside of that, there's almost nothing like a large net could catch. You know what I mean?
So I'm seeing here on the headlines that Jameson Williams and 4 other players were suspended.
Right. They even cut a guy. I mean, they paid him $2.5 million guaranteed money, and they had to cut him. CJ Moore.
Moore. Okay.
Right. Of the Detroit Lions. They straight up cut him because I think he was gambling on the NFL was the difference between him and Jameson.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. That is the Calvin Ridley situation, right? That's what he got caught doing, was gambling on the NFL. Jameson Williams was not gambling on the NFL, but he was doing it on part, property, whatever, of the Detroit Lions. So
I'm actually more curious about CJ Moore because he was gambling on the NFL, and the most famous case of gambling in the history of the NFL was Alex Karras and Paul Hornung, I believe, in 1963, and they were suspended for a season. And we're talking about 2 future Hall of Famers. And so they were suspended for the entire season. So in this case with CJ Moore, I'm a bit curious because it's one thing for the Lions to take a stand on this and say, we're going to cut him. We don't want anything to do with him. But the NFL should be enforcing something.
Yeah,
I would think.
but it almost seems like the NFL / NCAA, I mean, it's just so hard to police. So like you'd already said, I mean, this is going to be, you'd have to be a complete moron and then get caught, I guess. And then that happens.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious at that, because I got to think that all sorts of players in the NFL are gambling on sports, even if it's not the NFL. They're gambling on their school, they're gambling on college games, they're gambling on these guys. And I understand it. This is not a knock on them. They're football players and they played at the college level. They probably think they can pick every game right. And I don't hold that against them. So I got to think that this is happening all over the place. And that's why I'm interested to hear how these guys got caught, because I got to think that there was a certain circumstance that happened that threw this just in somebody's lap that they couldn't ignore it.
Right. That's a lot more IT than I go. I'm sure of that. But anyway, if you don't mind, if I switch gears here, I do have another.
Sure.
For you. Have you already covered the CFB changes as far as the time goes, or for the new rule changes?
No, not in terms of the first down, the clock rolls,
right,
except for the final 2 minutes of the half. I have not covered that.
I kind of wanted your thoughts on that as far as, do you think that has advantages for certain teams? Is that something that you want to come to the game? Is that something that you were kind of rooting for? Is that something that you'll just kind of take in stride?
Yeah. So this is where I stand on rules, is that I get annoyed by rules that are not consistent with the rest of the structure of the game. So for example, they made a change about 5 years ago that when a team kicks off, the ball could be fair caught anywhere on the field, and it's brought out to the 25-yard line. That is not consistent with the way football is played.
Correct. Yeah.
You can't just catch the ball anywhere you want, and it advances automatically 24 yards, 1 yard. Like, that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing within the foundation of the game that makes any sense. And there's a few other rules like that are like these conjured up artificial rules that don't go along with the structure of the game. And I will place this in the same category to a lesser extent because what's magical about the last 2 minutes of the first half or the game? There's nothing. There's nothing that separates that time from any other time played in the game. This is all it is. We want to speed up the game, number one, but we want to still make it exciting at the end of the first half and at the end of the game for offenses. We're going to increase their chances of scoring, but that's an artificial rule. Like, that has nothing to do with what's different about the way the game should be managed on the field with 1:55 on the clock that wasn't present at 2:05 on the clock. It's stupid.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there for sure.
And it plays to the advantage of the teams that have better quarterbacks and wide receivers that can move the ball down the field quickly. Absolutely.
You think so? Because I think like maybe a team like, maybe Michigan, for example, would have an advantage by being able to run the clock later in the game. You know what I mean? Like, they can continue the drive. They can continue to ground you out.
Oh, I see. I got you there.
Yeah.
I was looking at it the other way. You're absolutely right. So we're both right. You're looking at the rule change in and of itself,
right,
is going to favor teams that have leads. They're going to be able to protect the lead easier because the clock's running and there's less time to come back. I was thinking more than once the 2-minute hits, then the teams that can throw the ball and execute in the passing game. But you're exactly right. Yeah, there are going to be less comebacks, which I don't think that's good for college football.
Right. I don't love that either. I mean, that's what we find exciting so much about it. And yeah, teams that dominate time of possession, they're only going to get, I feel like, better because they won't be incentivized to throw a deeper ball or maybe something like that, especially.
Yeah, that's a great point. Exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm not crazy about it. I think that all these rule changes are made. They're going to tell you that they're made for player safety. And I think that has something to do with it, but it's more about games are going too long. And this is affecting advertising dollars because I worked in that world and I know exactly. I worked in a department that actually I could look up any television spot and see how much each spot was costing because we managed that. And it was a nightmare to try to get, when games overlapped by 40 minutes, it was a nightmare to try to get the inventory in. So they're basically speeding up the game to get the first game off so that they can kick off the next game on time.
Right. When you say inventory, you just mean games in general, right? Like,
no, inventory by commercial inventory.
Oh, okay. By revenue is what you're saying. Okay.
Like, you miss breaks, you miss commercial breaks, and you get behind because you start the second game and it's like, say, the 3:30 game, which kicks off at 3:37, but you don't join it until 4:02, and you've missed a bunch of break opportunities and you're behind.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I can completely understand that. Okay. I'm cool with that.
Anything else tonight, Brant?
No, I don't think so. Hey, I appreciate you taking my call, and I appreciate the time. And just so you know, it was super easy to get in here. Very, very user-friendly. So
absolutely. I hope somebody heard you when you said that because, I can get on here and talk for 2 straight hours, but I'd rather not.
Yeah, and I don't love hearing my own voice either, but, it's a lot of fun. And just take the time, make a call, and ask any questions you have because, I mean, honestly, those were the rule changes especially. I want to know your thoughts on it, and thank you for taking the call.
Thanks, Brant. Appreciate it.
Yep, take care.
So Brant brings up a good case right there in regards to how we structure these shows. So most of the time I will come up with a topic just because I think that's an interesting topic, or of course, if it's a big news day where there's been somebody fired, hired, something like that, of course, that's going to shoot to the top of the list and that's going to be our focus. But you can call me about anything in college football at any time. And we have left the link in the chat a number of times. And for whatever reason, and I've had this conversation with a few people in particular, Tim, I've had a conversation with a number of people about this, that for some reason, when we had the call-in line And there's a number of reasons why we dropped the call-in line. Two basic reasons. Number one, it costs $12 to $15 per show. So think about that. I used to do a lot more call-in shows. Before I had all these team live streams that I'm doing, 11 of those a week, I used to do call-in shows almost every night. I would actually like to get back to that. If I could get capable people to take on all the team channels and take on all the team shows, I would greatly love to build this main channel into something special. But anyway, that aside, I used to do a lot more call-in shows, and it cost $12 to $15 per show. So think about that. It would run me $60, $70, $80 per week just to do call-in shows. And obviously, I'm not here on a completely charity basis. So that was issue number one. Issue number two in having the call-in line was actually when we had a technical issue one night with the call-in line, we then reverted to StreamYard. And guess what? People applauded us for going to StreamYard because they said it was much clearer and that they could hear the callers much better on StreamYard than they could over a phone line. I may look into Google Voice. I don't know anything about it, but it's been suggested to me. But in the meantime, if you don't want to appear visually and just want to do it like a standard phone call, a traditional phone call, you can do that. Just shut down your mic, or your mic wouldn't work. Shut down your camera, and we can take it on like a traditional call. Back to the Brian Ferentz comment. So again, I don't know who Tom Halterman is. There we go. Oh, he's just a fan. Okay. I thought he was a writer or something. But he was retweeting or making a comment in response to Brian Ferentz's comment about his approach to the offense and that he's not changing because of the contract terms. These contract terms. This could be a topic some night. What are the stupidest contract terms you've ever heard of in sports? Now, most of us are going to bring to the table athletes who have been awarded way too much money. Way too much money. The first that I can remember, oh man, this is going way, way back, and I'm going to lose most of you, so I'll make it brief. When I was just a lad back in the late 70s, there was a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians, my beloved Cleveland Indians, possibly the team that I have loved more than any other team ever in my life, my beloved Cleveland Indians. Anyway, they signed a pitcher from the Baltimore Orioles who won 20 games with the Orioles by the name of Wayne Garland. And Wayne Garland was a complete bust for the Cleveland Indians, and they signed him to a 10-year contract. Now, it wasn't necessarily their fault that he got hurt. However, at the same time, across town, there was the Cleveland Cavaliers, owned by Ted Stepien, who is arguably, I don't even think it's debatable, but not that I'm tracking owners, but that he is the worst owner in the history of professional sports. And he was so bad at his owner's responsibilities that the NBA took away his right to trade players. He made such unfair trades. He was such a moron and would give away great talent for nothing in return. And then he would sign these players that were marginal players. Scott Wedman comes to mind. Anybody know who Scott Wedman is? Look him up. He played for the Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he was like a three-point shooter that he was like a poor, I mean impoverished man's Steve Kerr, like a really bad Steve Kerr. That's all he could do. And he couldn't do anything else. And he scored like 4 points a game or 6 points a game because he would hit 1 or 2 threes. And that's all he could do. He was completely useless on the court. And he was like the 5th highest paid player in the NBA because the guy that ran the Cleveland Cavaliers was a complete moron. And the NBA had to step in and say, you are no longer allowed to complete trades. This guy was so incapable of functioning. He reminds me of somebody else in leadership right now. But anyway, he was so incapable of functioning that he also owned the Cleveland. It was a softball team. I can't remember their name. The Cleveland Competitors. The Cleveland. I'll have to look it up sometime. The professional softball team that nobody went to see, but they played their games on the local channel 43 in Cleveland. And to promote the team, because he knew nobody watched the games, nobody went to the games, it was a bunch of like beer gut guys that could hit the ball 450 feet. And that was the game. That was basically, you'd either pop out or you'd hit a home run. And that was slow pitch softball. It was awful. The Cleveland Competitors, that comes to mind, but I don't think that was quite it. To promote the Cleveland Comets? No, it wasn't the Cleveland Comets. That doesn't ring a bell. I'm going to look it up here in a second. So the Rod Favre chimes in with the Cleveland Comets, and the Rod Favre is about as knowledgeable on all aspects of Ohio sports as anybody around. So anyway, it is the Comets. Really? I might be going back before your days, because I don't think I'm going to look this up. So anyway, to promote the softball team, listen to this, folks. And I know you want to talk college football, but if nobody calls me, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. That to promote this softball team, the slow pitch softball team, you know what he did on opening day? He went to the Terminal Tower, which is the tallest building in Cleveland, and he dropped softballs off the top of the Terminal Tower. And he had his players down on the street to catch the would-be fly balls. And he hit like 2 or 3 spectators, or they were just walking along the street because nobody, of course, cared what was going on. And he actually injured people and sent them to the hospital. I think it's the Cleveland Competitors. That's the feedback I'm getting from maybe you guys. Ted Stepien softball team, softball drop. See, it came right up as I Googled it. Yes. This guy was, if you don't know anything about that and you just want to be amused for a few minutes, look up Ted Stepien. The Terminal Tower softball incident. Yes, there was a link at a site called Forgotten History. Not forgotten by the voice of college football, but Forgotten History. The Cleveland professional slow pitch softball. I just want to see what they're now. The website expired. Can I not see? I promise we'll talk college football, especially if you call me. The Cleveland. Okay, the Cleveland Jaybirds. Good job by whoever put in the Cleveland Jaybirds. But it was the Competitors. They changed the name to the Competitors. So good job by everybody that said the Jaybirds, because you are right. Although I did not discover this team until they were changed to the Competitors. That's what I remember, the Competitors. Unbelievable. So back to Brian Ferentz. So we could have a conversation sometime about the worst contracts in sports history. But this would be in there. Not that it's not achievable, not that he's not going to meet the mark, not that it's not based on last year's performance by the offense in the Iowa football team. It was not achieved. I think they only scored like 18 points a game. Isn't that the number? They scored like 17.7 points per game. So before I take the Reels call, my point here is that when he says, I'm not changing my approach to meet a contract term, that shouldn't be your incentive to change your approach. It's because you've got the 131st ranked offense in the country. That's why you should be changing your approach. And that's what I believe I said. I guess. I can't, these Twitter threads, they go in such a way that I can't find the rest of it from there. Yes. Quote, we're 131st in the nation in offense. No need to change our approach. Yes, yes, yes. And then this spoof account that John referenced, it's gotten me this far. Why change now? Of course, that was all in jest, but I took it straight. Not I knew what he was going. I knew that he was being satirical, but I still just wanted to play along. Yes, said the high school senior with straight D's. All right, let's get to the calls. We got to Real MVP here. DeReal, what's going on tonight?
Nothing much, Mark. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Didn't think I'd hear about softball today, but
hey, you leave me up to my own devices, and I'm gonna just rant on about whatever hits me.
Yeah, hey. All I know about softball is Oklahoma has a pretty good team, but outside of that, couldn't care less.
You especially didn't think that you would hear about Cleveland slow pitch softball from 1980.
No. I like Thomas Hero's idea is that after that incident, Cleveland should have been forced to change their name to the Cleveland Concussions.
That's a good one. I like that.
That would have been funny. So, Mark.
Good job, Thomas Hero.
Yeah, exactly. Smart man.
Well done.
Mark, there's a lot of intrigue. I'm sure you saw the FBI that came out.
Oh, love the FBI. Wink, wink.
Yeah, there was some controversy, believe it or not, about some of the rankings.
Yes.
That came up. And I would just like to discuss a few of my issues with the rankings.
Okay. I'm going to pull it up here.
Okay.
Keep going.
Well, the first thing I'll say is, Mark, every year, it seems like certain teams are just overvalued because of talent, but they don't take into account culture or anything like that. And listen, Florida just needs to be on a blacklist from this list. Whatever their ranking is, they should just automatically put in their formula. They're going to be minus 30 spots from wherever the formula spits it out. There 18. Should be no way Florida is the 18th best team in the country.
No. I didn't look at that aspect of it.
Well, what aspect did you look at?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, for as much as I would love to believe, I can believe that Ohio State can win a national championship. I truly believe that they can win a national championship, but I don't believe at this juncture of this offseason that they in any way should be ranked the number one team in the country. And I find this a bit odd because this is my understanding of the FPI, and I'm no expert on the FPI. I am an expert in criticizing the FPI because I've done that many times through the years, and I'll tell everyone a few reasons why here in a second. Is number one, it's obviously based on talent evaluation. It's obviously based on recruiting rankings. That is a huge component in this because who are the three at the top? And not only the three at the top, look at the gap after Georgia. It goes down 5.3 points. So they are clearly saying those are the three best and most talented teams in the country. And they're probably right about that. But like you say, that's not the only thing there is. I know that in the past, it's been said by people that know the FPI, or I've read the formula, that there is a lot of weight that goes into either if you lose a coach or you lose a quarterback. Well, the top three teams in the country obviously don't have their quarterbacks coming back and still are 1, 2, and 3. That's about my take at this point.
Well, something also about Ohio State that bothers me is you can actually scroll and see their percentage of each thing the FPI factors.
Yes.
And in no way do I believe Ohio State has a 57.2% chance to make the national championship game.
Wow. I didn't go down that far. I don't know if it shows on the screen. That's as far as I can scroll. Oh yeah,
I see it fine.
I have to go to another window, so I can't always see what's on the screen. Oh my goodness, you are right. 30. Nobody, well, not nobody. Nobody not named Alabama for the last 15 years or Georgia the last 2 years should have a 37% chance of winning the national championship against the whole field. That's crazy. And I think Ryan Day's a fine coach. but Ryan Day hasn't proven anything at that level yet. Again, we're not talking about Saban. We're not talking about Kirby Smart. We're not even talking about Dabo. And we're talking about a quarterback who's not played against anyone except the mighty Zips of Akron. See, for anyone who would ever call me a homer, I should be running away with that FBI number one, but it's not correct. It's not even, it's a joke. That's awful. And I think Ohio State's loaded with talent. Sure, they can win a national championship, but those numbers actually should be like 7 or 8% chance of winning a national championship.
Yeah, basically what those numbers are saying is if we played the college football season 10 times, Ohio State would make the national championships about 6 times, and they would win it about 4 times.
That's nuts. If that was stated for Georgia, I would say, that might be a little bit high, but you can certainly respect what they've done the last 2 years and say, you know what? They've earned that, and they've shown that they can lose 5 NFL defensive first-round players and still win the national championship by 58 points. Wow, that's egregious. The only thing that I can recall that's worse than those numbers on the complete opposite end was after Ohio State lost Urban Meyer and Dwayne Haskins. Do you know what the FPI gave them as their chance of winning the Big Ten?
No, I don't remember.
6%.
Oh, wow.
And I was going nuts and saying, in what universe does Ohio State only win the Big Ten 6 out of 100 seasons? Like that is the most insane number. So this isn't as insane, but it's still way inflated.
Yeah, it makes no rational sense to me.
Wow. I didn't, I only looked at those first few columns. I didn't take it all the way to the end there. This is good video material right here for me.
Well, good. Something else, LBC Trojan mentioned in the chat, Washington being only 21 to me is just completely disrespectful for what talent they're bringing back. They're a good team. And by this, they're projected to go 8-4. 8-4? I mean, that's disrespectful to me for Washington.
Just to clarify a point for anybody that's looking at the projected win-loss record. So what that is obviously there's an FPI. So they're basically telling us that Ohio State's the best team in the country. Alabama's 2, Georgia's 3, and on down the line. That is exactly how they believe, their computers believe the teams rank. Then they put that FPI through their schedule, strength of schedule component, and then it comes out with a win-loss record. And that's why, for example, LSU has a worse record than Texas, but they are ranked higher. They believe LSU is a better team, but they play a tougher schedule. So that's what happens there. And then if anybody's wondering, the reason why some teams have more than 12 games played is because they are projecting them at a certain rate to go to the conference championship game. Like for Ohio State, 11.8 plus 1 loss is 12.8 games. So they're basically saying they have an 80% chance of going to the Big Ten championship game.
Well,
which you would think should be higher than that if they've got a 58% chance of winning the national championship.
Well, based on the rankings, Ohio State has a 71.2% chance to win their conference. Meanwhile, an 82.2% chance to make the playoffs.
Well, we saw that happen last year.
I know. So I'm just giving you the numbers, though.
So I've got an issue with Texas.
What's your issue with Texas?
They're not. I don't know what shows that they're the 5th best. I don't know besides recruiting rankings. Now, this is completely ridiculous because with the top 3, and to a lesser extent what LSU accomplished last year, but the top 3, well, there is proven production and winning. With Texas, that is all about a recruiting ranking. That's all that. What have they done but go 5-7 and 8-5 the last 2 years? And bring back a quarterback who was pretty lousy last year. Now, we all were impressed with Quinn Ewers against Alabama, and he had a really good quarter. And I was pounding the table and saying, man, he was phenomenal. Look at him. But he had a bad season after that. And Texas is going to be a consideration for me to go to the college football playoff. So I'm not saying that they're not capable, but for them to be ahead of Michigan, no.
Well, Mark, here's something else. You can actually toggle by each ranking.
Okay.
Texas has the second best chance, according to the FBI, to win their conference.
Okay, how does that work? How does that make mathematical sense?
So I don't know, but according to the FBI, out of every single team, Texas is the second most likely team to win their conference. The only team that has a better chance to win their conference is Ohio State.
Oh, I got you. I thought you meant that they were second in the Big 12.
No.
Okay. Yeah, that I get. If they're number 5 in the country and they're number 1 in the Big 12, and Ohio State's got to face Michigan, and Alabama, Georgia, and LSU face each other, yeah, I get that.
Well, I would consider I would have USC, Georgia, Clemson all having a better chance at winning their conference than Texas.
Well, I do believe that Texas is the best team in that conference. They will probably, for the 14th consecutive year, figure out 47 ways to screw up 4 games and finish 8-4 and not win the conference, but they are decidedly the best team in that conference. They should win the Big 12.
Right, but I don't think they have a 54.4% chance to win it.
I agree, but I don't think that that's that off, because I think
that's pretty off.
Now, this is what I think is off. Oklahoma is the 11th best team in the country, coming off 6-7. They picked up some marginal additions in the transfer portal. They had a really good recruiting class, but how much of an impact does that have the first season after you have that kind of recruiting class? And they're better. Oklahoma's better than Tennessee, Oregon, Florida State, and Utah. I'm going to have to see that.
Well, that just goes back to your theory about recruiting rankings, Mark.
I guess.
I mean, that's literally the only thing I can think of, because Oklahoma last year, they finished, top 5? So.
They were 6-7.
No, in recruiting rankings.
Oh, top 5 in recruiting. Yeah.
Right. Some other ones that don't make sense to me is TCU being at 17. I don't understand TCU at 17 at all. I mean, Max Duggan's not on the team. They played in tons of close games. I don't see them being anywhere near as good as last year.
Well, I don't either, but number 17 versus being number 2, 3, or 4, whatever you want to place them last year. Right. I agree with you about Washington. And again, I've not done a huge, super deep dive on any of these teams. But with Michael Penix back, yeah, I do like Washington better than that.
So that was just some of my key takeaways. And I'll go to the biggest controversy that these rankings had, Mark. And that was between, your favorite teams, Ohio State versus Michigan. A lot of Michigan fans had an issue with them being ranked 6th.
Sure.
While Ohio State was ranked 1.
I get
especially in comparison with what Michigan has done over the last 2 years as compared to Ohio State. Do you have an issue with that?
I do. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why I haven't released my program rankings for 2023 basically is I haven't taken the time to go through them, but I will say that I am going to have difficulty. So Michigan fans understand this if you see Ohio State above Michigan, and Ohio State fans understand this if you see Michigan above Ohio State in my 2023 program rankings. But I very much can argue points as to why Ohio State still has a better football program than Michigan. But the easy route is to say Michigan won the last 2 years and they won decidedly, and they won the Big Ten championship, and they've got a proven starting quarterback coming back. So they are the team that's better than Ohio State. So they should be ranked ahead of them.
That makes logical sense to me. I think probably Ohio State should still be ahead of Michigan, but I don't think the gap should be that huge.
Yeah, it is pretty substantial. Let's see. And I don't know what these rating points really mean, but 31.5 compared to 21.4 seems pretty decided.
Yeah, well, that's equal to USC all the way down to
Oh, that's a good point. 19,
Kansas State.
Yeah, that's a good point. From like number 7 to 27. That's almost like the recruiting rankings. That's what the recruiting rankings look like. They're bunched up at the top, the elite, and then it really cascades and falls from there. I don't think Syracuse, shoot, Iowa fans, if you're with us, I don't think Syracuse is better than Iowa. I don't know where that's coming from. Who's the worst team in the country? UMass. Though they have negative numbers. Look at that. I didn't realize that.
Well, I think it makes sense for UMass to be at the bottom of the list and for them
Sure.
to have a negative number.
Texas San Antonio is the average team in America, I guess, with a 0.2. Okay. Interesting. So my last knock on the FPI, Daryl, unless you've got, we can talk about this all night, but obviously I want to bring on these other callers. But my last knock I'm going to take us back to the 2017 AFC Championship game, because these FPI numbers are directly related to the win probability that you see on all the college and NFL games every week. And then what I find fascinating, and whoever thought it up is ingenious, they're much smarter than me, but I don't necessarily think that it's been executed correctly, is obviously the percentage fluctuates during the course of the game based on the situation, based on the score, the time left, etc. I still remember this. And I wouldn't have known this otherwise, because I'm not an FPI guy. I'm not looking at the win probabilities throughout the season. But I remember watching the highlights of the AFC Championship game, Patriots-Jags. Patriots win the game late. They were down by 10 with 10 minutes left. And I see this pop up on ESPN showing the highlights, and they say, when New England was down by 10 points with 10 minutes left, their win probability, Jacksonville's, was 99.2. And I'm like, what? Who in the world doesn't think that New England has more than a 0.8% chance of erasing a 10-point lead with a guy that's won 7 Super Bowls at quarterback at home against Jacksonville when they got 10 minutes left in the game? I'm thinking it's about 50-50 at this point.
Yeah, if there was like 2 minutes left in the game or something like that.
Oh, the Falcons lead 28-3 on the Patriots, whatever number they wanted to put on that, absolutely. That was historic. Yes.
Or there was a Cowboys-Falcons game that ended 40-39, where it was like a 16-point lead.
Yes.
2.5 minutes or something crazy like that to go. I could see being that his high.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember that game just from a couple of years ago. And we've got our buddies Tim and Rick, and they are suggesting they would like to keep you in the chat. So this should be a good time.
See,
Tim,
this is what happens. I praise the Pac-12 and I get some love from the Pac-12. So
I am going to be feverishly, as you guys start your discussion, feverishly looking for overrated teams in the Pac-12 just to get Tim and Rick riled up. I'll see if I can find them. Tim, Rick, great to see you guys. These guys put on the most amazing USC show, Trojan Conquest Live, each and every Sunday night. It's at 5 Pacific time on the USC channel. They do an amazing job. They make me look bad because I've got to get my act together and put together better productions than I do. Great to see you guys.
I'm not sure about that.
I just wanted to say that this has to be one of the best calls I've ever heard from Daryl. And not just because he complimented Washington, because he brought up facts. I mean, straight, cold, hard facts. you put your name on certain things, right? Your name goes on things. Mark Rogers, voice of college football. How can ESPN have their name attached to this trashy poll? I mean, and they're attached at the hip with the SEC. So anything they say about the SEC in the next contract, I've got a question, because here's a perfect example of just a ridiculous poll that means nothing.
Well, it's not a poll.
Well, yeah. Well,
it's a
take that
computer.
back. It's
program.
their, well, you want to call that, it's
guess.
their computer. You can manipulate numbers, and obviously they have in several instances that you guys have pointed out tonight, and that Jareel's pointed out. It's talking season, obviously. Jareel, unbelievable call, man.
Yeah, no problem, LBC. I was going to say, you don't think 4 of the top 5 teams going forward in the SEC are all in the SEC? I can't believe that. 4 of the top.
No, I know. Hey, don't get me wrong. The SEC is the best conference, but
LBC, I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, no. But the Florida situation, I mean, who's their QB next year? TBD? Who the hell is TBD? That's who I want to know. He's better than Michael Penix and their 2 star wide receivers coming back that each had over 1,000 yards. Put that into your computer, ESPN. Smoke it. 8-4. I looked at their schedule. Washington's not going to lose more than 3 games next year.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the all being in the SEC. I think I'm counting that the top 7 are either in or going to be the SEC or the Big Ten. You have 4 SEC and 3 Big Ten teams.
Oh, you're talking Darrell MVP's deal right there, because this is the future of college football, right, Darrell?
Unfortunately, it's the way I think it's going, but I could be proven wrong, and I would like to be proven wrong. But
Darrell, you're right, and it's a Big Ten and SEC world. And Mark, I want to. What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm just reiterating what Tim, because I didn't realize that. Yes, the top 7 teams in the nation 1 year from now would all be in the Big Ten and the SEC.
Well, and it's going to be actually 8. It'd be 9 out of 10 once Notre Dame gets off their hands and joins the Big Ten, and then you have Penn State. So now you're looking at 9 out of the top 10 teams. Yikes. And let's face it, Clemson's probably going to either be in the SEC or the Big Ten at some point. So, I mean, really, you look at the top 10 in 2 conferences. So,
well, Tim, you can expand that with Oklahoma and Texas, and you'd have 12 of the top 11
in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And you had a show on the other day. I can't remember, a couple days ago, and it had to do with the TV ratings. And Larry Pilgrim had a call.
Yep.
If you recall, and he brought up a question of, hey, he didn't understand why ESPN had the Utah-Oregon game starting at 7:30, and it was kind of, he believes maybe hurt the ratings because USC and UCLA were still going on at the same time. 2 Pac-12 games competing against each other, so to speak. Do you recall that phone call?
Yes.
Okay. And unfortunately, I couldn't get in that night. But Larry, I love you. That was a great call. But that's a foreshadow of what college football is going to be about, because it's the Big Ten, the SEC, and everybody else. If you remember on that Saturday, Fox was showing Big 12 and Pac-12 teams, because in the morning, ABC had the Big Ten games. Do you recall, Mark?
Well, I would have to look at the lineup for that particular week, but
they had Ohio State and Maryland was on ABC at 12 noon East Coast time. I'm sorry, 3 o'clock East Coast time.
Yep.
And then you had that followed by, it was preceded by Michigan, Illinois, that great game.
Then you had those were the 2 highest rated games of the week.
Right. And then what happened was Fox had its choice, right, of the 8 o'clock East Coast, 5 o'clock Pacific, of, presumably a Big 12, Pac-12 team that they wanted to take. So they took USC, UCLA over Oregon, Utah. And Oregon, Utah was relegated to the after dark 7:30 Pacific time slot. That's basically being put in the corner. When it comes to TV, you are on the bottom shelf at the grocery store. That's what it was. So that is a precursor of what's going to happen to the Pac-12. And then this 8-month saga we call the Pac-12 media rights deal. It's all
Wait a minute.
about, yes.
Wait,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rick, to cut you off, but I
Yeah.
thought you were done. Which game are you pointing at that was being thrown into the dumpster by ESPN, the Utah-Oregon game?
Yes. So Fox had its choice. You
Sure.
know how like Fox or ESPN will get its choice. So
Sure.
I'm presuming Fox got first choice of
Mm-hmm.
who they wanted to take. And they could have taken Utah and Oregon. And you know this business better than I do, but I'm presuming they had their choice of the game, and they chose USC and UCLA. And
Sure.
they got a number. They got a number that was 2 million higher than Oregon and Utah.
Yep.
So
where else would ESPN put that Utah-Oregon game?
Well, what was on ESPN earlier? You had Tennessee, South Carolina. Are you going to put Tennessee, South Carolina at 10:30 at night? No, you're not.
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying, where does
Yeah. So there you go. So it doesn't really matter. It is what it is, and that's what the Pac-12 is going to be. There's the example. USC and UCLA will not be there, and you might have a good Pac-12 game, but it's going to be on ESPN at 7:30 at night on the West Coast.
And I don't know how often this is going to take place, but when USC and UCLA are playing Illinois, Minnesota, they're still going to draw decent numbers, and those are going to be probably 10:30 games at night many times. And the Pac-12 is going to have to compete against USC and UCLA at times.
There you go. You have more inventory. You have better teams. You have more. You have 3 networks showing 16 teams that have compelling reasons. I would say 10 of them have compelling reasons to tune in. And whereas the Pac-10, let's just say you keep it at 10, you probably have 3 teams that you want to tune into if you really wanted to find it and tune into it. And that might be towards the end of the year. That's pretty much it. That's just telling the truth.
Anything from you, Tim?
I'm just joining the conversation. I want to remind Daryl though, you've been a little lackadaisical on our bet. That's why I came in really to say, remember, we have a 1-year bet.
Oh,
1 year? I thought it was 1 month. Sorry, Tim.
1 month? No 1 month. Just want to remind you. I didn't want to be too pushy, but
you're fine. You've got that neon sign to remind you in the background of all times of all the great victories of Pete Carroll. Hopefully, for your all's sake, you all can win. Because for me, USC, their best chance of winning a national championship is this year. And the only reason for that is because you all will have to play Ohio State or Michigan.
No.
And it's a harder road than the Pac-12.
I get your point, but no, USC is going to continue to stockpile talent, and they're going to address the defense, and that's not necessarily all going to take place this year.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, if you look at the road, this would be the easiest road to go down.
Yeah, but that's not the only factor.
Well, okay, I understand that, but
were you talking make the playoffs or win a national championship? You're saying our best chance to make the playoffs is this year?
No, to win the national championship. I think USC will be a perennial playoff contender with a 12
I would have to counter. I would have to say that if USC is going to win a national championship, that would mean they would have to be very competitive within the Big Ten. Don't you agree?
I think they can go 10-2 or even 9-3 and make the playoff.
When? Just on a regular basis?
Yes.
Well, I think if USC gets back to being USC, they could be the best program in the Big Ten.
Oh, I agree.
Well, then they're not going to be going 9-3.
Well, I'm just saying if they were to, though. That's why I said they're a perennial playoff contender. That should be expected out of them. Because what I consider to be their worst, they'll probably still make the playoffs.
Yeah,
but I think most years they're going to split Michigan, Ohio State on average, be 11-1 and make the playoffs.
So
But
do
the
you
prob-
mean, well, they won't be playing both those teams in every year. They'll probably be playing one or the other every other year. Is my guess. I'm thinking that I have it to where they have when they have the 3-6-6, it's going to be where they'll have Ohio State and Michigan staggered, would be my best, because let's put it this way. I know you don't have the highest regard for USC, but I do believe that the ADs at the respective schools in the Big Ten do. And so if you're a team like Ohio State, who you already play Michigan every year, do you think they're going to want to play USC and Michigan every single year?
No, I don't think every year they're going to play USC and Ohio
It'll be
State and Michigan.
staggered
I think the
every other
TV
year,
would
right?
love it, but
Hmm?
I don't think that's happening. But I think there's going to be upset losses and stuff like that to factor in as well.
No, it's just going to be it's just going to be the Big Ten is just going to take another step up as far as the quality of the top end of the conference. Just like hopefully that SEC thinks that they're going to do, bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. But
people
I like
to
that
address the
phrasing, by the
problem.
way, just to undermine the SEC. I like that phrasing.
Mark,
What's that?
this is a historic night. This is the first time I've ever agreed with DeReal 2 times.
Okay.
DeReal said that this year, 2023, is going to be USC's best year to win a national championship. And I agree. With the news that just came out today, the NCAA loves USC. So they changed the rules. They changed the rules today to reduce plays. That way, USC's defense can't be on the field as many times. So the offense can possess the ball as much as possible, and it's going to give USC the best chance to win the national championship this year before going to the Big Ten. I agree with you 100%, DeReal.
Really? I don't.
I do.
I think people and a lot of people in the chat.
I got tongue in cheek.
Okay.
And we don't think the NCAA is our friend, Mark. That's completely about as
but it's
sarcastic as he possibly could have been.
Because there's a ton of people in the chat that agree with DeReal, but they're getting way too hung up on just schedules. This USC program, now I might be wrong, but there is a huge possibility that it's just starting. It's just starting to build into the monster that it's been under John McKay, John Robinson, Pete Carroll. And if it's that, then sure, Ohio State and Michigan are going to be forces to be reckoned with, but there is a 12-team playoff. There are going to be teams winning national championships that didn't win conference championships.
Yes.
They are going to have such a better opportunity not having the 100th best defense in the country like they will this year going forward.
Well,
I understand
Mark and I have talked about this a bunch of times. But for the rest of you guys in the chat that haven't heard us have this talk, there's certain teams that have very, very high floors, right? They're never bad. They're always really good to great. And then there's teams that can be quite bad. And now, before you guys started throwing USC in that category, USC has probably maybe 4 losing seasons in my lifetime, and I'm no spring chicken, So it's not like bad by like elite team status. But there's also teams like Ohio State that win 10, 11 games every year for decades, right? And they're very high. But anyone that's older than, let's say, 30 years old knows that when USC has the right coach, and then therefore they're recruiting elite linemen to USC, that you need to watch out, that we can play with anybody in the country. And I'm not sure if you're keeping track, but we're in it right now for Bear Alexander, who's almost, there's a really good chance we're going to get this kid, which would take that USC defense from a substantially improved defense to a very, very good defense. They picked up guys, and I don't mean backups or guys who are castaways. They're picking up guys that were starters on their teams, and they're sticking them and they're plugging them into our lines. And I think a lot of you out there that are thinking that USC's defense, Alex Grinch, Riley, they can't have a defense. I think some of you guys are going to be very surprised by the front seven USC is going to have come September. So think about that one. They have a strong defense to begin with, but they have Anthony Lucas already. If they get Barry Alexander to go along with, I'm sorry, Rick, who's the Who's the defensive end that we got from Purdue?
Jack Sullivan.
Jack Sullivan, Kion Bars at nose tackle. These are big dudes. These are not your typical small West Coast linemen. So
defense is completely overhauled with the transfers and the potential that's still going to come in the next couple this next got 10 days, 10, 12 days for this portal, the second portal. So
yeah, and the week before they introduced 2 brand new NILs. Until now, we had these Mickey Mouse NIL weird kind of plan they had going. Well, they fired through that the window because it wasn't working. And they brought in a bunch of ex-alumni, alumni ex-football players that said, enough of this crap. We're going to start doing the NIL stuff that other programs are doing. And I think that this next batch of portal players is going to open some eyes.
I am taking an approach tonight that I don't typically take because I don't like it. I like to take one call at a time. I don't do the whole free-for-all business, but it's Tim, it's Rick, it's DeReal, and now it's Porter. So why not? I might be heading off to, I don't know, find my next snack or something if you guys get rolling. Porter, what's going on tonight?
Hey, guys, let's party.
The world's greatest Georgia fan.
Well, thank you. Believe me, I'll wear that very proudly. So, hey, listen, I hate to rain on y'all's parade, especially the Southern Cal guys. I mean, you know, I've said it before. I love Southern Cal. I mean, college football is better when Southern Cal is good. I got into college football in the late 70s, back when John Robinson and Charles White were doing their thing and all that. So I want nothing but the best for Southern Cal. The problem is, I think the travel that's going to happen between flying out to places like Maryland, flying out to, obviously East Lansing and places like that, I think it's going to wear your team out.
Porter, I love you, man. I respect Georgia. I respect the SEC. But you got to understand, USC is a national brand. Okay, I don't know Georgia as well as you do, and I'm going to bet you don't know USC as well as I do or Tim. But we're a national brand. We've been playing Notre Dame every year for almost 100 years. And every other year we fly back to South Bend. And you can go take a look on Sports Reference. Go look at USC's schedule. In the 60s, we were playing at Michigan State, at Iowa, at Notre Dame. We would be making 3 trips in the 60s, okay, to go play the best competition. Go look at our record versus the Big Ten. We've played 100 games against the Big Ten. Many of them were back east. So if there is a team that could do it in the 60s before charter, it's USC. Now, there's teams in other part of the country that don't want to travel, and they don't have to because 2/3 of the teams in the population are east of the Rockies. We get that. But if you want to be the best, you got to play the best. So I don't buy that argument. Don't buy it at all. It's a myth.
Well, LBC, just to go on to that point, I mean, people have got airplanes. It's not like horse and buggy. It's not like we're using the Pony Express here.
Exactly.
I appreciate the hubris. I really do. So let me just say this. I guarantee
it's hubris. It's the truth. Go back and look at the facts. I mean,
well, let me jump in. Porter, can I say one more thing?
But you weren't a member of a conference that
Porter,
based in the middle in the Midwest. You weren't.
Porter, give me a second.
In a conference that was based there.
I can help out with the conversation. Give me a second to say this really quick. If USC was going back and forth, I get you. So if USC is 1 week in LA, next week in Ann Arbor, back in LA, then out to Maryland, then back to LA, and then we're going to East Lansing. Yeah, that would be a hell of a lot of travel, and that would be a nightmare, right? But here's how I'm almost certain it's going to go down. I don't have any proof, but I'm pretty sure that the presidents at UCLA and USC did have the student athletes' well-being when they thought about it. Because they're still student athletes. I'm telling you what's going to most likely to happen is you're going to fly. So SC is going to fly out. So let's say play Purdue. So usually, teams fly out like on a Thursday, right? They get there, they charter a flight, they get there Thursday, they have Friday walkthrough, they have their game on Saturday, and then usually they fly out Saturday night, correct? That's usually what teams do when they travel.
Mm-hmm. So
instead of flying out Saturday night, they're going to stay in the Midwest and then, maybe go to Columbus or somewhere, right? And so that's a really short trip. And they're going to remain in the Midwest, stay there throughout the week till Saturday. So now they're probably in the Midwest for about 10 days and then fly home. Remember, they only play, only in the Big Ten, there's 9 conference games. So one of those games is going to be against UCLA. So that means there'll be 8. And then you're assuming in most years, so say it's like half and half, right? Going to be away games and home games. So really, you're looking at 4 road games in the Midwest, correct? Are you with me on my math? So that means 2 of these 10-day trips a year. That's not a lot of travel. If you remember, USC travels, it's not like the SEC where everyone's luckily kind of close to each other within conference. I mean, really close. You know, we have to fly up to Seattle. We got to fly out to Colorado, to Boulder, Colorado. These aren't short little trips. And they don't have to go through, thank God for these poor kids, go through all the rigmarole from going through security. These are chartered flights. So they get on a bus at the campus. They go right onto the tarmac. They get onto their plane. They fly. So you're talking maybe an extra hour flight time to go from, let's say, instead of going to Seattle, you're going off to West Lafayette or wherever they're flying to, right? It's not that much of a difference. And so when you couple the games together, there's a big myth like USC's going to be flying back and forth, racking up all these frequent flyer miles. That's just not going to be happening. And I don't think this whole thing would have went down if they were required to do that. So I hope that sheds some light on how much the travel is going to be.
Yeah, to be honest, Tim, the travel concerns reminds me a lot of the Big Ten fans complaining about the weather. It just is a non-issue to me. If USC has a good enough football team, they can overcome this little bit of an obstacle and beat these great teams. I mean, if USC can't, then they don't deserve to win the national championship or even be mentioned in that discussion.
Here's a
Well, if
perfect
Lynn Swan was still the AD, if Lynn Swan was still the AD and Clay Helton was the head coach, right? Then I wouldn't even be having this conversation. So yeah, we'll probably get our butts kicked, and they're gonna march us up and down the field kicking our ass, because I watched Iowa in the Holiday Bowl pretty much do that. Just slam the ball down our throats. But when you have the right leadership, the right coaches at certain schools, you literally have to get in your way to lose. And I think USC is fully invested, and I've been following this team for a long time. And when they have the right coach, when there's the alignment that Mike Bone and Lincoln Riley talked about, this alignment they have for success, they have a plan, and it's slowly unfolding, you guys. And I know a lot of people probably aren't paying attention to it, but take a look at the roster pickups USC is getting. Pieces they needed. We lost Dye. They got Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina. We lost a couple offensive linemen. They went across the country to Florida and picked up 2. Now, Ethan White's not coming anymore. He's retiring from football. But now they're talking about going to Texas A&M and getting another guy. Or who's the other guy from, Rick? There's also Missouri. No. The other offensive lineman.
Cameron Johnson from Houston.
From Houston. And these are guys that are freshman All-American. We're not grabbing cast-offs. And so I think that we're going to be able to compete in the Big Ten.
I'm right there with you.
Is Porter still on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. To win a national championship, you have to play the best. You have to have a great schedule. And perfect example of this, 1967. My God, that was the year I was born. They were actually flying planes back then. Okay. And USC played Texas in the second game of the year at home. After playing Texas, who was a darn good team in the 60s, they went on the road to Michigan State, East Lansing. Michigan State won part of a national championship the year before. Mark, do you recall in 1966?
Well, I was minus something. I don't even want to say how many at that point, but I was minus something. So I wasn't around for that, but I am a historian of sorts. So yes, absolutely.
You know Michigan State.
10-10. Yes, Notre Dame.
Okay.
Notre Dame ran out the clock instead of going for a win. Yes, 10-10.
All right. So this isn't chump change. So they go to East Lansing after playing Texas. All right. They after playing Michigan State and winning, they come back, they play Stanford, and then they go on the road to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame also won a share of that 66 championship. So they have to go back to East Lansing to South Bend 2 weeks later, and they win that. Then they come back, and they got to go on the road to Washington the following week. No bye week. That's a 1,000-mile trip from L.A. So basically in the first, my counting, 5 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first 6 games, they're at Michigan State, at Notre Dame, at Washington. And guess what? They won the national championship in 1967. So if they can do it 55 years ago, they can do it in 2024 and beyond. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the most, and again, you're probably going to say, you're probably going to laugh when I say this comparison. I'm not saying, I'm not comparing the programs. All I'm saying is the most, I guess, the most recent example of a program that tried to do what you're doing in terms of the proximity is West Virginia. Now, you may laugh, but when Southern Cal was winning all those national championships in the 2000s, they were going to BCS bowls. They went to 3 BCS bowls in the 2000s. Since they went to the Big 12, they've been.
I think we know what.
Yeah, we lost you. I see where he's going with it.
Yeah.
And I have all the respect in the world for West Virginia, but really, you just can't. I'm sorry, you can't compare USC to West Virginia.
West Virginia is looking for their first national championship. I love.
Well, not even that. I just mean historically, the players we get, the coaching, the budget, just everything across the board.
Yes.
What they do in West Virginia is amazing. They're like, there's categories of football. You expect teams like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, to do very well. But then you have teams like Washington State, Oregon State, West Virginia. I mean, you can throw all teams in there. They're always.
I wouldn't put West Virginia in Oregon State and Washington State. Just to be fair, Tim, I got to jump in on that one. West Virginia is like a top 15 all-time wins leader.
Let me fit. Well, let me fit what I'm saying.
They're not those two.
Teams that come up and have great seasons and play above where they should be. I mean, you can say they're top 15 in all-time wins. That's great, but what have they done all time, really, as a program?
Well, that means that they're winning a lot of games. They're not. Oregon State is one of the worst winning percentages in history, and so does Washington State. They're awful all time. I'm not talking about this second, I'm talking about all time, and you are as well.
Yeah.
West Virginia is Wisconsin. West Virginia is Ole Miss or.
Okay, so I guess I'm not as much comparing West Virginia as an all-time program to West Virginia the past 25 years compared to an Oregon State the past 25 years. That's where I'm going at. Sure, you have your Pat White years and you have some great players come through West Virginia, and I'm sure I'm gonna have Joey on here in a minute just telling me everything. But I was a compliment, meaning that they punch above their weight, is what I'm saying. That's all I was trying to get to. And I'm using examples of people that are actually in the chat as examples as well. I'm not saying they're on par as far as two programs historically. I'm saying when I think of West Virginia, they come up and they have great seasons once in a while.
Well,
but to compare West Virginia to a program, that's like, when we compare West Virginia to historically, Georgia and USC, which one's the better program?
USC.
Historically, if we're doing those numbers.
USC.
Right. But we wouldn't compare USC over the past 10 years to Georgia, would we? No.
No, but I mean, listen, I conceded the point when I made it. I don't understand what you're harping on. I said you're probably going to laugh when I make this comparison because their best years that they've had in recent years, you guys were having outstanding seasons. You probably don't remember them kicking the crap out of Oklahoma or kicking the crap out of us in the Sugar Bowl or kicking the crap out of Clemson.
Yeah, that was only 12 years ago.
12 years ago marks a long time in college football.
It can be. It depends on the situation.
I mean, Jimbo Fisher's won a national championship before then. And I mean, now you can't find a Jimbo Fisher defender.
12 years ago, talking about how this season is going to play out is a long time ago. But when you talk about 12 years ago, when we're talking about just college football in general, it's not that long ago.
Well, to me, 12 years is a long time for sports discussions. I like 5 to 6 year time.
Like Real,
your life.
what has happened to Real in the last 12 years in regards to who has resources and ability to win championships? Very little.
Right. You're right. Which I think is just a college football problem. I don't think that's a sports problem as a whole. I think it's just exclusively to college football. But
Mark,
one of the things I'd like to amend is last year I had Florida beating Utah. And going into this year, I thought Florida also was going to beat Utah again, but I'm going to call an audible. Utah, what they're going to do to Florida is going to be humiliating to Florida Gator fans. Florida might not even score, and Utah might win by 50. I'm not even trolling. Utah looks really good, and Florida looks like an absolute joke and a train wreck.
Daryl, I don't know about that because I don't know if Cam Rising's going to be ready to go to play against Florida the first week of September. And I say that because I think the earliest he had, I think it was an ACL injury. They didn't come out and say it officially, but we've heard
Lower leg injury, yeah.
Yeah, we heard to that effect. And if he had that surgery in mid-January, that takes really 9 months to be at 100% these days. And you're going to tell me that he's going to be cleared? You don't get cleared for like contact for like 6, 7, 8 months. And, do the math. That's going to put you in July, August. And you're really going to go out there your first game and play Florida? Why? I mean, he could play, but I just don't think that's the smartest thing to do when you've got a long season and high expectations for your program. And then you got to go, I believe, to Baylor next.
You're right. But LBC, my point wasn't more pro Utah, it was just anti-Florida. Yeah. I mean, Utah should be able to throw their backup, their third string, their fourth string. I'm honestly not sure Florida's better than Vanderbilt right now. Wow. That's how low I am on Florida. Like, they just don't look like a team.
Cam Rising's a really big part of that offense, though. Certain positions on certain teams are more prolific. And when I look at that, now Utah has had a history of having good running backs and tough, undersized but tough offensive linemen. But I think losing Cam Rising, the team you'll see earlier in the season will not be the team you'll see later in October, November.
I agree with that. I'm just shocked with the Florida spring game of how bad Florida's offense looked.
Wow.
They looked like Iowa level bad, to where they just didn't look together. They didn't look organized. There looked like there was no communication. I didn't see a plan, and I don't know what their identity is on offense, and that's a problem. I don't know their quarterback situation. I have no faith in Florida this year, like zero.
Hey, Tony, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Question for both Rick and Tim. Are fans in Los Angeles excited about joining the Big Ten?
I think the diehard fans is a mixed bag. I mean, as much as we rag on, because, the Pac-12 has left a bad taste in our mouth, going back to even the sanctions were levied on us that they didn't support us at all, etc. The TV contract was a mess when they restructured it through Larry Scott. There's a lot of weird stuff, but at the end of the day, a fan like myself, and I'm sure I could speak for Rick as well, we've got fond memories of all the programs in the Pac-12. So that part of it's bittersweet, but I mean, I'd be lying to you. I cannot wait. I have my whole family's from the Midwest. So, I mean, I can't wait to go to some of the greatest stadiums in the world. I've met many Big Ten fans, from Iowa to Nebraska to Ohio State to Michigan through the years, going to bowl games and things. Now I get a chance to fly out there for conference games and go to some of the most historic stadiums there are. I can't wait. So speaking for the rest of everyone, I think all the knowledgeable fans in USC and UCLA are ecstatic about the opportunities. But at the same time, it's bittersweet because we're leaving longtime rivals. I'm hoping, I was talking to Tony Altomare just last night. I just hope somehow, some way we work out getting Stanford and Cal into the Big Ten. I don't know if that's a possibility, but there's a lot of history with those California schools that I hope moving forward, but I'm excited. What about you, Rick?
Well, I'm going to tie this in, Mark. You've got the question tonight. Which teams will fare best after college football realignment? That's the question for the call-in show. And I think on your thumbnail, Mark, you had the 4 new Big 12 teams. You had Texas and OU going to the SEC, and SC and UCLA going to the Big 10, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think it comes down to the way I interpret it is how are they going to, which teams are going to fare the best? I think there's a financial aspect, and then there's on the field, wins and losses. Who's going to have the best opportunity to win their respective championship and go to the playoff? And so when it comes down to money, obviously you're going to eliminate the 4 that are going to the Big 12, and you're going to talk about OU, Texas, SC, and UCLA. And then you got to look on the field and what's going to happen there. And I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to have a heck of a challenge going into the best conference in America with all those great teams. So it comes down to SC and UCLA. And so you look at both. SC's got the heritage. They know how to win big. They're fully aligned from the president to the board of trustees to the AD to the head coach, their whole infrastructure, NIL on board. They know how to play on the road. That's what we do. And we don't hide from anybody. So when SC's operating on full cylinders, we're loved, we're hated, we're feared, but we're respected. So USC is going to do the best. I'm excited. I have a lot of friends that are excited because we've had enough of the BS and the disrespect by Larry Scott and the other 10 teams in the Pac-12, because we built the Pac-12 from the Pac-8, the PCC, to the Pac-10, to the Pac-12. We've won the bowl games. We've won the national championships. We carried the load. The NCAA crapped on us. The other teams crapped on us. So did Larry Scott. You got your equal revenue. Okay, and what did you do for 11 years? You did jack, right? You did jack. You didn't win a national championship, and we're the laughingstock. We're the 5th rung. We're the 5th best conference in America, Power 5, right? So take your extra money, Uncle Phil, what have you. Hey, I'm sick of the Pac-12. Good luck. Good riddance. That's how I feel.
SEC Dog, we love you. Great comments in the chat. However, this one, don't be too concerned about Purdue and Minnesota, even if that's a tie with the Washington States and the Oregon States of the world, and I don't believe it is. They'll draw more viewers, those Big Ten schools. But even if it's a wash, go from the top. Select your best Pac-12 schools and your best Big Ten schools and go down the rungs and match them up in regards to popularity and TV audience, and it's not comparable. It's not even close.
I mean, I'm not sure how excited I would be to watch Alabama play Vanderbilt.
Everybody has those
games. What I mean?
Sure.
There's these teams. I don't know how much I'd want to see Georgia play Kentucky.
USC played Colorado on a Thursday night last year.
Sorry to reel. My bad.
I was there. I saw it. Live.
It was a 10-point game. 10-point game.
Real. What I mean by that is not that it won't be a great game. I'm saying as a national, Joe 6-pack in I don't know, Southern California or Indiana.
I get you.
How much do they care about that game?
That was a CBS game that did extremely well, actually. But we get your point, Tim. You're right.
Hey, we're gonna hopefully we'll eventually shock the world.
Yes, every conference has those games. They have to be played. They are played. Again, I started to say USC and Colorado played on a Friday night. There were like 500,000 views on that game. Those games have to be played. They're part of the conference.
Was it on the Pac-12 network? I mean, what network was that on?
That was on FS1, I believe.
That's actually something I'm interested in, is with Deion Sanders. How big of a number could that game get? Because Colorado's got a bunch of bandwagon fans now. Let's just be honest about it. They've got a Tim Tebow-like effect.
Well, the games that are going to be interesting for Colorado are going to be the first 2 games of the season when they play TCU and Nebraska. Nebraska still brings a lot of viewers to the TV sets, and I've gone through these TV ratings the last few weeks. But if Colorado gets off to some amazing start, or at least they're respectable and still kind of fun to watch once they line up against USC, absolutely. That'll be a fun one. And that'll be one that people will watch. Yep.
Yeah, I think if Colorado's even 5-7, 4-8 type of team, I think they'll have millions of fans watching just because of Deion Sanders.
That might be pushing it.
Yeah, Deion Sanders, I think, is probably the most influential person since Tim Tebow. I mean,
did
he's
sell out all their season seats. They're completely sold
I
out.
wish, yeah, I wish.
I
the
understand that
Bucks-
now they are, but if he's 3-9 2 years from now, it's
Right.
but absolutely. I totally agree with all of that.
so I think that would be a fun comparison for next season if you do the TV ranking. You
Connor
could do
John-
like an increase and decrease.
Connor Johnson is telling me that I'm showing my age. I'm younger than Deion Sanders is.
Yeah, their first 5 games were brutal.
They play who? TCU,
So they're
Nebraska.
at TCU, home against the Huskers. Then they get a bit of a break here with Colorado State. That should be, at home. But then they play at Autzen, and then they have USC at Boulder.
Okay, well, that game's early enough in the season. There's still going to be some juice there, even if they're 1-3. Absolutely.
I'm not so sure Colorado doesn't start out 2-0. Like, I think they could. I think it's really on the board. I just don't see TCU being so less talented than Colorado to where Colorado can't win that game.
Where I worry about Colorado is going to be defensively, and I think TCU is going to put up a lot of points at home against them. You might start to see the bandwagons wobble a little bit, the wheels wobble a little bit after that first game. I think TCU actually. I don't think that TCU is a great team, but remember also, even if they had a great stacked roster, they brought some people, and that's fine. People have to remember, you can't just plug in a new coach, plug in a new coordinator, grab a bunch of players, and then expect to just like light the world on fire.
Yeah, the USC fan is telling us about how the transfer portal doesn't
it was a
team.
little bit different. People make the mistake. You got to compare apples to apples. USC, I'm sorry, is not Colorado.
I understand
Lincoln Riley is not Deion Sanders. You know what I mean? And what's his son's name? Shadur Sanders is not Caleb Williams. There were some built-in factors that helped Riley to have a really good year this year that probably other new coaches don't have.
My point of the matter is Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley had a year together. Sure, Deion Sanders and his son had a year together. So it's not like they're just learning a brand new offense or anything like that. They have a culture together. And I think that matters. So a lot of these players aren't brand new to the system. A lot of these are from Jackson State. And I think that's going to elevate the team more than just grabbing a bunch of random parts.
I'm pulling for them. I hope they do well. I think it's going to be a great story. I just think that they're going to have a pretty rough start. That's all. And then if they, I'll tell you what, if he goes 6-6, it'll be a huge success for Colorado. So I just hope people aren't stacking too much on that team. It's just really hard to do. That was a very, 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 very bad Colorado team. That defense was worse than USC's 2021 defense, which was very bad. It's gonna take a lot of rebuilding there in Colorado because they also had their teams taking their best players. So I mean, they really walked into an empty cupboard.
Oh, I agree. I think 6-6, 5-7 is probably what they're going to be at. I just think TCU Colorado is going to be that game where at the beginning of the season we think it's a massive upset, but at the end of the season we realize it really wasn't that big of an upset. Because I'm just not sold on TCU being able to repeat anywhere near the performance they had last year. I think they'll be a 7-5, 6-6 type team.
And Gary Patterson's not an defensive analyst there anymore. I think they got a, so. Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm mixing up my team. I'm sorry, that's TCU. My bad. I'm thinking wrong. He's not the head coach there anymore. Sorry. Yeah.
Time to promote, folks. We've got an Amazon link in the description section of all the videos, so please grab that, put it somewhere where you will remember it when you do your Amazon shopping. Again, the Amazon link is in big capital letters in the description section. We've got a Discord that you can grab either as a YouTube member or on Patreon, and you can talk college football with these knuckleheads all the time, 24/7, 365. We talked to Tom Luganbill, and I got to say, Tom Luganbill said that he had 20 or 25 minutes. He jumped on and I think we had such a good time. He was at 45 minutes, and he said he had a production meeting, and he kind of blew through part of that, and we had a great time, and it was a 45-minute conversation. I released the first part, split it into 2 parts, and actually the second part of the conversation was even better than the first. So check out with one of the guys that I think is one of the best analysts in the game, and we really went nuts and bolts, and you obviously love college football, so you're going to love that conversation. And Tim and Rick should be listening to this in particular because May, and Rick has already, Rick has already jumped on this. May is Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football. And we have some great debates to unveil for all of you. So if you've got a great debate that you would like to see waged, then this is the time to do it. Serve it up right here at the Voice of College Football. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and we've got some great debates that we are going to wage during the course of the month of May. And we've got a Nebraska watch party. The Huskers, yes, hit the field at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, and we will do a watch party over on the Nebraska channel.
Mark, which team do you think is going to fare best after college football realignment?
Oh, I don't even think it's close. Long term, it may be close because maybe Texas will get their act together. But right out of the gate, you pretty much lined it up. Obviously, the 4 schools to the Big 12 make that conference a lot of fun. If you're just looking for fun football, competitive football, the Big 12 is the place to be going forward. Like, I don't know who's going to win the Big 12, but if we're talking about who's going to play it at an elite level and be vying for college football playoff appearances, again, you broke it down. Oklahoma, Texas. I don't believe either program is in a position to challenge at the top of the SEC right now. And I think long-term Texas has those capabilities, even though they haven't had the program Oklahoma has. But to one of Tim's points in really looking at what USC's been able to do when they've been at their very best versus an Oklahoma, and with all due respect to Oklahoma, we've seen them run into the likes of a really strong team from the SEC that's bound for a national championship, and they've just not been able to muster that kind of roster. It's USC, clearly. I think UCLA is intriguing. I think they're extremely intriguing because I don't know if this move is going to kind of bolster their program and give them maybe added focus and energy to say, let's go for it. Let's not just, they have to be hearing everything that, well, USC is joining the Big Ten. Well, yeah, UCLA is joining the Big Ten, but USC is joining the Big Ten. Wow. What's this going to be like? Ohio State, Michigan, and USC. I got to think somebody in that UCLA athletic department is saying, let's become a new program going forward. So they intrigue me.
Interesting.
See, for me, Mark, I guess I read the question different than anybody else.
Yeah.
I think UCLA got the best out of this deal because, to me, they just got tagged along because USC's there.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
you can read the question that way too. Absolutely.
So
maybe UCLA should pay us a tax in addition to paying Cal a tax. We should get a broker fee for getting them into the new conference. Don't you think, Mark? 10% fee? Come on.
That could be it.
All right.
You can't leave your little sister behind. You know that.
We're UCLA's agent, getting them in the Big Ten. Give us a fee.
Now, those 4 schools, if you're going to look at it that way, those 4 schools that are joining the Big 12, they're making out pretty well because they're finding a safe haven within the power structure of college football going forward. They can make their nice paycheck from television, and they play in a conference that they actually can all win.
Well, we're all getting excited about having Deion Sanders at Colorado. It was a big froth over that. Imagine if UCLA got a top name coach. I mean, you really have to think about that. That's how quickly you could turn. If they're in the Big Ten with Big Ten money, they decide they want to play big boy football like USC just woke up and decided to do when they got rid of Clay Helton. It can turn around really, really quickly in this day and age.
Oh, Tim,
They have all the built-in advantages that USC has beyond the tradition. But going back, you got to go back a ways. But you go back to like maybe even, what was it, 1999, 2000. They were knocking on the door of a national championship themselves with Bob Toledo, and that's Bob Toledo. Imagine you put a top coach at UCLA. I don't want to think about that because I know how they can recruit. They can recruit very well with the right coach.
I have said for years, they are the biggest wild card in college football. And I've always been enamored with, why doesn't UCLA win more? And it's obviously the commitment level at the school, because they've got all these built-in advantages that they've not taken advantage of for the most part. But to Tim's point, they were a fourth quarter in Miami away from playing for the BCS championship in 1998 in the very first BCS title game.
And that was a weird play. I can't remember how it went down, but there was a weird play where the guy was almost down or down and ran the ball.
Yes.
And also, didn't they have to replay that game against Miami? Like it was.
That was a hurricane wiped out game from September. Absolutely.
So who knows how the world would have been different if that game had been played early on the season. You don't know how that goes down. So yeah, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, Mark, you were making the point I was going to make, and I just don't know how much UCLA fans care about college football, like in general. Seeing their stadium this year with how good they were was legitimately frustrating. I mean, they had Vanderbilt level of attendance when they had a Washington caliber team.
Well, so, it lags behind though. You have to remember, and I know other people in other parts of the country don't want to hear this, but you have a great Dodger team. You have LeBron James in town. You have 2 NFL football teams in town. You've got 2 MLS teams in town, 2 hockey teams. You have to win in Southern California. You can't just expect that, just because your grandfather and your dad, were alums and they love the school, that guys are going to line up to go to football games. It doesn't work that way in Los Angeles. It's not snobbery. It's just reality. I mean, you do understand. You get that point a little bit, Daryl? And they've been a really bad program for about a decade.
I understand that point, but I've looked up LA's population. And in 2022, they had 12.488 million people there. You can't get 60,000 of those people to go to a game?
Again, it's very culturally diverse. How many of those people actually watch and follow college football? Most of them are Dodger
just
fans.
Don't care.
Well, it's not they don't care. It's just they have options. Do you know what I mean? I hate this debate. I don't want to go into it. It always gets heated. I'm not saying some places better than other places. I'm just saying there are championship quality programs like teams like the Dodgers, like the Lakers, right here in Southern California. It's just that's the way it is.
You're
and
right.
If you're not
there's
a winner, no
one's
going to go to your team.
But I think there's more than enough people to make up for the factor there's more options.
How many of those people are from the Midwest, from the South, from all around the world? LA is not like a smaller, either Midwest town or Southern town. It's a major, like for instance, when I worked, I had more Ohio State fans at where I was working than I had USC fans. It just because they were from different part, Los Angeles, people come from all over the world to work in LA.
Right. But my point is, the people in LA do not care about UCLA. That is my point.
And I agree. So we saw their stadium.
Right.
But remember also, there's nobody. I'm sure you could find UCLA fans are just as diehard as any USC
there's
or
some
Alabama
out there,
fan
absolutely. But I'm just saying there's not as many as different
Agreed.
teams.
Agreed.
Don't let the exception break the rule here.
Yeah, but the sheer numbers, you're falling into a mistake thinking that whatever million people that are in the LA metropolis area are college football fans to begin with. And then you're assuming that they're not fans of San Diego State, like I said, Ohio State, USC, Michigan, all over the place. You know what I mean? It's just a different kind of area.
My point, the only point of the matter is for me, is since you have more people, you have a more diverse pool of people to choose from. And I'm saying the greater the pool is, the more likelihood you'll have a UCLA fan in that pool is. And to me, it's disheartening that they don't have nearly enough UCLA fans to somewhat fill out the stadium. That's all I'm getting at. I understand there's plenty of options. I understand they have LeBron James. I understand they have the Dodgers, and they have tons of options. They also have tons of people.
We're fans of the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers. I'm just saying there are people from all over the country here. And then there's a lot of people that grew up here, but not all of them are fans. Think about it. We have two major universities, and this is the major ones, two major universities that are less than, like 20 miles apart from each other. Do you know what I mean? You have USC and UCLA in the same city. And that's just two of the universities that are here.
I get you. It's a huge city, and it deserves to have two great universities.
So it's just the way it is. I think if you win, just like any program, if you win enough, people are going to show up. They used to pack the Rose Bowl, when they were winning.
Oh, yeah. As a Kentucky fan, Tim, I'll tell you all about it. Look up the pictures of when Kentucky was losing to Vanderbilt by 40, or when Joker Phillips was there. You'll see UCLA level of attendance. So you're right. There is a level of winning brings you more fans. But at week 6 or 7, when you're 6-0, 7-0, 8-0, I feel like there should just be more fans there than there actually was. That was my frustration with it.
Mm-hmm.
If they were 3-0 and they'd only beaten like Mercer State, then I get your point. But they just beat Utah. They were playing Utah, and they were undefeated, and they beat Utah, and they still couldn't get a huge crowd.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, great discussion tonight. I'm going to go ahead and drop off, let somebody else come on. I spent more than enough time. Mark, very gracious.
Thank you, Rick.
Love the show.
Appreciate you being here.
Daryl, great talking with you, my friend. Have a good weekend. Tim, as always.
I'll see you at the game tomorrow.
See you at the game tomorrow. See you.
See ya, LBC.
See ya.
So, Tim, this is a good time to highlight what you and Rick do, and especially this weekend.
Oh, well, on Sunday night, we do a weekly show of the USC Trojan Conquest show where we basically run down the team. Last week we had great passes. John Jackson, wide receiver for USC back in the late 80s, got us field passes, which was awesome. We got to go there. And this week we're going to just kind of break down the numbers on there's some transfer portals. A lot of guys, as you know, that opened up last Saturday. The portal opened again. USC decided to announce their two new NILs coming out that same week. We got Bear Alexander and a bunch of linemen from across the country there. So we were talking about the prospects of bringing in some more linemen and anything else that's on the docket. I mean, we're still kind of putting together. There's a lot, just like any major program, there's always news, and we'll be covering that tomorrow at
Folks,
5
this show
5 o'clock Pacific and 8 Eastern.
Absolutely. This show is full throttle, like hardcore USC talk. Great stuff across the board. Just great insight. You get Tim's perspective, Rick's perspective, and as you can see, they are working on bringing in a contingent of top-notch guests. So really good stuff out of Tim and Rick, and I appreciate them supporting and building our USC channel to the point that we had really good numbers on our live shows last week. Matt and I were around 130 on Monday night, and Matt Zemek stops by from Trojans Wire. And if you want to hear about college football, specifically USC, of course, but Matt is an encyclopedia when it comes to college football, and he's phenomenal as well.
Yeah, my favorite video last year on the team channels was Rick did a live vlog from the Pac-12 championship game. Not just because they lost, but the way he was talking to fans about the game, interacting with them, it felt like it felt like you were just there at the game. And that was a great experience just to watch it, and tons of people were there. And you guys do a great job with your show. So,
well, thank you for watching. I know you're in there as much as you can. Appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, no problem. You guys do a great job, and I like supporting great shows.
All right. Anything else we need to serve up tonight?
No. Rick got out just for how I was going to drop off. But no, I mean, I think we covered it. I'm really disappointed in you, chat. You guys are out there. I see some amazing fans. I see representing some great universities. All you got to do is what Real's doing or what I'm doing right now. You just turn your camera off and you come in and talk to Mark about whatever you want to talk about. It's disheartening to be up here and talking, and Mark puts on a great show. You guys have an opportunity. You guys are in the chat. Just jump in. I remember the first time I'll admit, I was like a little bit nervous, but then when you talk to Mark, you feel like you're talking to a guy at a sports bar and a guy that knows what he's talking about, not some guy slurring his words and barely putting sentences together. So you're missing out. I think you guys should jump in. I think it'll chase you. Most of the guys, Mark, that jump in once, it's like an addiction, right? They just keep coming back.
Yeah, our first caller tonight was Brant. He said he's been watching since 2020, and he said, I just decided to call for the first time, and we had a great conversation. He had some great questions, and it was a good time, and I hope he stops back. And yeah, especially these folks on Twitter that I run into and get into debates with. I'm practically pleading for them when they are calling me all sorts of names and that I don't know what I'm talking about.
I love keyboard warriors are my favorite. The guys out there that have a big voice on the keyboard, but not so much.
Of course, that same sentiment doesn't go to everyone watching in the chat, because these are our folks that drop in every night that we know and love and have a great rapport with. But yeah, I run into folks on Twitter, and I very politely, I'm not going to tear them to shreds, but I would love to have the conversation that they start on Twitter. Yeah. That they're, of course, afraid to continue directly.
And if
I've
you
never
read the
been
chat,
taken up on any of those.
Mark, if you read the chat, I mean, I don't agree with everything they say, but there are some very knowledgeable fans. I just don't get it. I'm not sure if they're in a loud environment. Maybe they can't call in, but a lot of the conversations go on in the chat. You could very well be right here with Mark. And I'm not saying about the chat, because there's some brilliant people in the chat, but I'd love for you guys to break into some of these conversations with Mark, because I see so many different fan bases represented, and usually we just have a guy from Kentucky, a guy from USC, Michigan, or Ohio State up here. It would be great to hear from San Diego State, or even Georgia. I mean, we have Georgia guys call in, but how
I
about
haven't heard from an Alabama fan in a long time.
Yeah.
Even
Alabama.
Mark,
I mean, there's
Wisconsin.
Probably a reason for that, with the way they're allegedly looking for Tyler Van Dyke in the portal.
Yeah.
I mean, 8-4 is on the table for Bama this year. So
yeah, wouldn't that?
And I see who is it? The Rod Favre saying he can't join. I know whenever I had to first join StreamYard, you had to click allow to access your camera and mic. So if you struggle joining, you might need to go into your settings to allow your phone or your Chromebook or whatever to access your mic.
So Roger Dodger says, I don't want to give out my cell phone number. So you click on a link, we provide a link, and that's all there is to that. No one sees anyone's cell phone numbers. Even when
I don't know Tim's cell phone number. And I've talked to Tim all the time. I have no idea his cell phone number.
562.
No.
Oh, no? Okay, no, never mind.
Even when we took phone calls, there's a buffer. There's a reason companies build phone systems to protect people's information anyway. But yeah, I guess, it reminds me of the old days before we took calls, whenever that was. I don't even remember, 2019 or 2020, somewhere in that range. I used to get on here and just blab for 2 or 3 hours. So I guess I'm going to have to revert back to that.
Yeah, I remember about a year ago. So it's been about a year, Mark. It's about this time, maybe a little bit earlier, is when was it? Oh, maybe a little longer, but a little over a year. I've been watching your shows, and a year ago you had more calls than you could shake a stick at. I don't know if this is an epidemic or what, but it just seems like last week or two. Is it just the off season? Is that what usually happens during the off season?
I don't think so. I don't know what it is, but again, that's fine. We've had some fairly decent crowds in. We had close to 100 tonight, so there are people out there.
Yeah,
There
wait
are people
till
out there.
San Diego State and SMU join, and there will be like 400 people. Every time there's realignment, it always brings big numbers. So,
Well, if I want to pull the numbers, that's exactly what I do. Is just talk about realignment every night because that seems to be what everyone wants to talk about. But
I'm
yeah,
gonna be
that's
honest.
not me.
I'm gonna be honest, but whenever I see realignment, I just want to run away from. I'm up to about here. I can't wait till the Pac-12 gets whatever deal they have, so that we can put all this crap to rest for at least a couple of years, and then start talking about real
well,
football.
Tim, you know what's going to happen is for 6 months we're going to have to dissect the fall offs and implications of it.
Oh, I really hope
Absolutely.
not.
Then guys like me tell you how they should schedule the conference and how they should divide the
I like
divisions
those.
and
I like those talks. I do enjoy those talks. You know, the breakdowns and stuff. But I mean, I just mean the constant like guessing game that where there's a shell game. This team, that team,
yes.
this contract. You know, the CW is going to be this or that, or Amazon or what. I mean, all that. It's like that was interesting for about a week, Mark. I got to be honest with you. And then I
Yeah.
just completely checked out.
Well, I got to tell you, I was getting off one of my call-in shows. This might have been a month to 6 weeks ago, something like that. And you know how YouTube throws you anything connected to your topic or what you like to click on. And I just got done with my call-in show, and I'm looking at, you know, the grid with all the various videos and live streams that are going on that YouTube's throwing me. And I counted like 12 shows that were on at the same time as me. And I didn't even know 10 or 11 of them. I didn't even know who they were. And they were all talking about realignment. And that's when I got a little fed up and I thought, you know what? Tomorrow I'm talking about realignment. I haven't talked about it in like 6 weeks, and I'm going to take a legitimate stance or, you know, find some thread of evidence, some real, you know, valid, you know, information out there. And I attacked it for about 3 or 4 days and people watched.
Mhm.
That's what people want to talk about.
I'm trying to figure out the whole Big 12 fascination with realignment. Is they just want to make sure that they don't have the worst deal? I mean,
That must
you know what I
be it.
mean? They're already done with their
shouldn't-
deal.
They must, because they shouldn't feel vulnerable because they're not vulnerable. Nobody wants to take their teams.
Yeah, that's why there's stability.
Yeah, they're
I remember they're
protected
talking
by
about
their
stability in the
mediocrity.
Big 12.
Yeah.
It's because nobody wanted you guys. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Get mad at me. It's fine, but
The
Mark,
ACC.
whenever you do, sorry,
Yep. Go ahead.
whenever you do the Great Debate Month, have a pro Big 12 expansionist guy and a pro Pac 12 expansionist guy. Okay? That legit might get the most viewers ever. Just have this beef clashed out because I see pro Big 12 videos and pro Pac 12 videos, but I never see them talk to one another. So I wonder if we can get some compromise, some common ground, or maybe some understanding.
Without stating their names, I know exactly what 2 people I would ask.
I know one of them.
I think I know one of them. I think it would be a great entertaining discussion. And listen, if we learn nothing, entertainment is at least fun.
I did not know the other person until they told me that they've been watching me for 3 years and they asked to be on the show, and we had them on about 3 or 4 nights ago.
You know, my grandmother once told me, somebody said, if you have nothing nice to say about someone, don't say anything at all. So I'm just gonna leave that comment right there. I watched about 5 minutes of that show, Mark.
Yeah.
And I watch all your, you know me, I'm in every one of your shows.
I
I'm in
appreciate it,
every
Tim.
one.
I know you are. That particular individual,
Can you guys hear me?
he contacted me. Hang
we got
on,
you.
the Rod Farva. Hang on just a second. Yeah. So I just figured, hey, I am willing to have anybody on here, and if they are just spewing forth some type of theories, if I can poke a hole in them, or if I can bring some kind of truth to the conversation, that's what I'll do. Otherwise, it's not going to hurt for me to let them expound on their theories. The Rod Farva's here. What's going on tonight, man?
I finally got it connected, boys. How we doing tonight?
Look at that.
Good. Did my
Doing well.
suggestions help you out in any way?
No, I had some other things
That's
in
fine.
the settings that I had to mess with. But hey, we're here, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
it's
are.
got loud
Tim,
and
how you
clear.
doing, man?
Loud and clear.
Tim, how you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful. Come at me, bro.
No, I'm not coming at you, man. Believe it or
I'm just
not, as
kidding.
much as
No,
we
that
go
was a
back
joke.
and
Go
forth-
ahead,
No,
dude.
I know you are, but believe it or not, I actually like USC. I lived in San Diego for 3 years, but my aunt, my step aunt, is a USC grad, class of 1980. She actually knew Charles White a little bit. I've been to USC a few times for games, and I was actually at the Rose Bowl, unfortunately for you, when they played Texas. So,
I was there too, unfortunately.
but unfortunately for me, I was at the last time I was there when Ohio State got absolutely shredded out there in 2008. And then I was there in 2009 when we choked that big game, big lead at the end of the game when Matt Barkley led you guys down the field. But one of the main reasons why I'm calling, I wanted to kind of bring back that conversation you and DeReal were having because, kind of being a guy here from the Midwest, but I lived there out west, I can kind of be like, like an arbiter in this. So Tim is right, DeReal, in the sense that Southern California is just full of Midwest and East Coast transplants, especially considering the factor that there's so many military people out that way. I had a lot of, like, my neighbor was a Navy SEAL from Cleveland. And then, I lived in the naval housing. And so the top 2 alumni bars outside of the state of Ohio and Michigan for Ohio State and Michigan were in a beach area in San Diego. So the allegiance for college sports there is really mixed. And in Southern California, especially in San Diego, where they're away from LA, and Tim could probably confirm this, in San Diego, they pretty much hate anything that is LA. So they don't mess with USC. They don't mess with UCLA. All they had was San Diego State. So that's why in San Diego, it was very pro sports oriented. And now that they don't have the Chargers, it's just a big mix of a little bit of everything. You saw a big
And
mix.
where did the Chargers go?
LA.
You wonder why they hate us? Yeah, go ahead.
That's one of the main reasons, man. Like, I can remember going to Dodgers and Charger games, man, or Dodger and Padre games rather.
Oh yeah, those are vicious.
Just a mess. Either it's in San Diego or up in LA, man. It's wild. But
well, you could the rest of the country, you guys can crack on our college football fans, but try messing with with Dodger fans.
No shot.
Dodger fans. I think the Dodgers lead Major League Baseball in attendance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. Like literally almost every year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, this has been going on since the 70s, or maybe before. I know since the 70s.
Yeah.
They were out in front of 4 million in attendance way when teams were struggling to get 2 and 2.5 million. The Dodgers, 4 million.
But attendance. That was back when people loved going to baseball, because as a Reds fan, even like in the 80s and parts of the 90s when we had bad teams, the Reds were drawing 35, 40,000 a game. But no one wants to go to baseball games, unfortunately, anymore.
But it's just perennial with the Dodgers. Like literally, you want good seats, you better paying through the nose.
You know, man, I love going to Dodger games. The thing I hate about going to Dodger games is leaving. It takes like 2 hours just to leave Chavez Ravine, and it's just a gridlock.
That's a bit hyperbolic. I live in Orange County, and I could be home in about an hour and 20 minutes.
Well, yeah, I guess it's different because I would always go stay with my aunt in the valley. So get back on top of college football, DeReal. So like. That's why like we see like this mix, and we probably have this opinion, right? Because like there's not really, it's just such an influx mix of college football fans in Southern California. Then when you get a little more central to Northern California, they're just not, you get those tech people and those Stanford and Cal people, man, they're not into it. They're much more into the, those Olympic non-revenue sports. I mean, Stanford isn't Stanford like one of the winningest athletic programs overall in terms of championships, Tim?
They have the most team championships of anybody. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Right.
So when you put men and women, if you just do men alone, USC has more, but they have the most overall.
Right, because they're dominant like volleyball, baseball, all that stuff. So yeah, man, it's just like, and that's where California gets. I mean, so it's not really not that people in California aren't passionate about sports. It's just, there's so many. Midwest.
Listen, I brought this up again. Okay. I don't see any way where you can't fill out all your sports stadiums when you have 12.488 million. The entire state of Georgia, for comparison, only has less than 10 million people. But that's the amount of people in LA. It is mind-boggling how many people live in LA.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think anybody truly understands how massive it is, because I don't think it can be perceived. And I understand they've got different sports and different options, but my issue is you need to prioritize college football at the highest in order to be at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And I just don't see many of the Pac-12 schools doing it. USC's doing it now, and look at USC's results.
Right.
There's a direct correlation there. But until UCLA, Stanford, Cal has that same level of effort and energy, I don't see them having the same levels of success.
But again, it goes back to my point, though. Like, you got to consider how many people in LA that live in LA aren't from, not even from California, let alone LA. You know, you got a lot of, because like even when I lived out there and worked out there, I worked with two guys that were born and raised in San Diego, and they were both Purdue grads.
Yeah,
Or
it's
then
just
you have
it,
a point
yeah.
where then I have a guy where he was born and raised in Detroit, but he lived out here and a diehard Michigan fan. He lived out there in San Diego. So you know what I mean? So it's a big, like, it's the same with Miami. Like Miami gets what, 70, like it looks like they get like 7,500 a game, but how many East Coast Midwestern transplants are headed back down south? You know what I mean? Like Mark has touched on it. You know, that's why we're slowly seeing Ohio kind of drop in like the quality high school football rankings. Like Ohio was considered by many as a top 5 state. Now it's barely in the top 10 because we're seeing more an influx of people from up here in the Midwest, in the Northeast, going south. So it's, you know, it's a population shift that really has a lot to do with that, in my opinion.
I'm not sure honestly where to take this conversation, because I just think out of 12.488 million people, you can get 60 or 70,000 UCLA fans to show up to a game.
I
Right.
tend to see both sides of it. The one thing that I'll ask Tim and the Rod Farva about that population, though, is how much of a percentage of that is different ethnic groups that don't care about American sports, period.
I don't think it's so much. I mean, I think it's more than just ethnic groups. I mean, just general interest altogether. Because, you know, the one argument that, you know, people down south have over everyone else is the fact that they're far more passionate than college football than we are, because, you know, they don't have the pro sports teams as like we do here in the Midwest, out west, and the Northeast, right? So I think that has a big factor in that as well. So, I mean, how many people show up to a UCLA or USC spring game compared to Ohio State, or compared to a Georgia, or compared to an Alabama? I mean, that is just general interest, and there's just more to do in those places.
Yeah, I don't know. There's more to do. There's just different things. I mean, you know what I mean? There's just different things, and I agree. I believe that college football is a religion in the South. I believe that, and I think as a college football fan, I'm very jealous. I think that's incredibly awesome.
Mm-hmm.
One's not better than the other. It's just different. I don't know how to explain it. Think of a major city, right? Think of like a Chicago. Think of a New York. You know, are any of these schools, do any of these major cities? Off the top of my head, just think. Look at Miami, for instance. Okay, I know they suck, you know, lately, but I mean, look at their attendance at their games, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
What's the difference between attendance in Miami and Gainesville? And we put similar records together. What do you think the attendance in Gainesville would be compared to, let's say, Miami? It just has to do with major cities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's the pro sports. I don't know if it's socioeconomic. I don't know if it's cultural. I really don't know, but it does seem pretty flat across the board. Like, for instance, I'm very ignorant. Mark, you can help me out with this one. What's attendance like at Northwestern?
It's awful.
Okay, so Chicago, major city, right?
Yep.
Not the greatest product, but I think it just has to do with, I don't know. I think it's usually a difference in culturally within the major cities. Look at Manhattan, you know, or like New York City or Philadelphia, right? Temple. How does Temple do in attendance?
Right.
Terrible.
Do you know what I mean? I think it's just a thing with major cities don't have the attendance.
I think the Real's point, though, and I get it, is you would just think, though, if you're drawing from, let's say, you're in Louisiana and you're trying to fill Death Valley 100,000 plus, and you're one of the smallest states outside of the likes of Alaska and Wyoming where nobody lives there. You're one of the 15 or 20 lowest populated states, but you fill out that stadium. And then just by the sheer numbers, you would think, even though the percentage of interest is much lower, that you've got so many more people to draw from that you would fill a stadium.
Yeah.
Well, here's one for you. It kind of goes to my pro sports thing. So the Dodgers are always the Dodgers, and they're selling lots of tickets. In '94, which killed the NFL for me, the Rams left, and so did the Raiders. Like, I think the same year, if not the next year. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, then when Pete Carroll came about 6-7 years later, USC was winning, but USC was selling out the Coliseum. Even when McKay was there, even McKay and Robinson, those years winning national, whatever, how many championships they won from like 68 to about 78, whatever, all those championships. My dad was there during those years, and he told me they're lucky to get 60,000 in a game. Even back then, when you had Heisman Trophy winners, national championship teams, you weren't selling. Why? Because there were other programs. Well, Pete Carroll, as great as Pete Carroll was, and I think he's amazing, he didn't have to compete with the Rams and the Chargers or the like now, or the Raiders back then, because there were no NFL teams. So so basically your guys that want to watch football, they had one choice. Sorry, UCLA. That was a shot at UCLA, but they had one choice to go in the Coliseum and watch them play.
Yeah.
So, and they were averaging 93,000 a game, sellouts.
And that was a great time for USC too, because really only the other team they were competing with in the city was the Lakers, because the Dodgers weren't. They were okay then. Well, I mean, they were probably a playoff team then. Can't really remember offhand, but like the Angels weren't good. You didn't have, like you said, you didn't have the Rams or the Raiders. No one cares about the LA Kings, right? Because
the Angels weren't good.
That's why I said the Angels were. I mean, they won in 2002.
Won the World Series in 2002.
But shortly after that,
I'm nitpicking, but
yeah, I know you.
They did win the World Series in 2002.
I know you did. I know. All right, so but you get the point though. So like during those like peak years, 05, 06, like 04, 05, I mean, who else was he competing with outside of the Lakers?
Well, I mean, like I told you about the Dodger fans, it doesn't matter if the Dodgers are in the pennant, a race or not. If they could be 500, they're going to sell out.
Interest of winning is what I was getting at.
Yeah, I mean that goes to the competition. That's what I'm saying. The football fans, the Rams fans and the Raiders fans, they were 5, 6 years, 7 years removed from watching big time football. And so if you wanted to watch football, you had UCLA or USC, and then Pete Carroll came and went on a run, and the rest was history. Like I'm not kidding you guys when I told you we don't sell out. I think USC has a core of maybe 50,000 fans that are always going to be there. Then you have your bandwagon, they're 15 to 20,000. So you're that 70,000 range usually, right? They're not selling out the Coliseum. And remember though, also some of you guys, if you're not in the Big Ten or some of these larger SEC stadiums, a stadium's gonna look smaller if you have like half of 93,000. You're still talking, even the small games, you're talking 50,000 people in the stands, which sells out a lot of smaller venues. But I get the whole point about how large LA is. You're right. The vast majority of Los Angeles doesn't give a crap about college football. They like pro football. And here's the thing. There may not have been teams in LA during those times, but there were still guys that were going to, believe it, they're going every day to Monday Night Football, every week to Monday Night Football, and to on Sundays, right, all day to go to the sports bar. There were football fans, but they were hungry for live football, and that was the issue.
I think Brian Myers here on the chat alludes to a really good point, and I might be missing someone, but if you really look at it, one of the big advantages Ohio has, or maybe not an advantage, but it's almost a great merging of the two. There's a lot of size and population. Ohio is still like the 7th or 8th most populated state, but it still has a small time feel to it where there's an attachment to Ohio State football. Everybody in the state loves Ohio State football, but Columbus is a large city. Now, it's not Miami or LA, but it's like the largest city in America that has a major college football team that the population is sold out to. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that there's population, but there's also a small town feel
Right.
and that engagement to the local team.
Agreed.
Mark, maybe it's just the gap between pro sports and college sports, because I don't meet many people who are just a fan of college or just a fan of the pros. Usually, if they watch pro football, they'll watch college football. And maybe in the cities, it's just different. That's the only reason I can think of from this entire conversation.
Right. And Daryl, you can credit more legalized gambling. It's going to just create a bigger gap, in my opinion.
Why do you say that?
This is in regards to the terms of interest, because it just seems like there's more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's more of a, I guess, push to gamble on pro sports. I mean, it's much more advertised now, and especially with the the popularity of fantasy sports. Like, you don't really hear too many people play fantasy football in college compared to NFL, right? So that gambling factor is always going to keep that gap pretty wide, in my opinion.
And generationally, guys, I just want to add this as well. When I was younger, the USC UCLA game was a huge thing. I mean, it was. Kids would come to, so for instance, right, probably like it is probably during, hate week, when you guys have like Ohio State, Michigan, all the kids in middle school, what are they wearing? They're wearing their gear, aren't they?
Yep.
And I remember when I was a kid, even like when I went to a Catholic school, right? And it was like, when Notre Dame SC came around, everyone had their gear on, especially for that day. It was just like en masse. I teach now, and I never see. Oh, sorry, I should say never. I'd say like rarely do I see a situation where I have a couple kids on those games wearing their gear like I used to when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I think generationally it's changing a bit too. I'm sure it's not nationally, but here in Southern California it is.
Well, Tim, I'm sorry to ask this question, but why do you think that is?
Because UCLA sucks. No, I don't know. I don't know. It's a billion different reasons. We are really a major, like, for instance, myself, my entire family is from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Like, all my uncles, cousins, my grandparents, my mom and dad both grew up there, went to Catholic high schools, and Catholic Central and West Catholic and Grand Rapids, Michigan. My dad came out to LA to go to USC and said, "I love you, but if you want to marry me, we're not going back to Michigan. We're staying here in California." And so that's how my brother, my sister, and we grew up in LA, and I went to USC, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, this Southern California is filled with people, not just from the Midwest, not just from the South, not from the East Coast, just everywhere. It's not uncommon. When the Arizona USC basketball game, it was like 50-50 Arizona USC, because there's so many Arizona grads, right, just down the way, that live in LA, and they pack the place.
Yeah.
So it's just not better. Like, I hate when LA people get on here and say, "Oh, because we got the beaches and we got this. We have so much better to do." I mean, I've been to the Midwest for many summers, and there's things there, going water skiing, going fishing, lake fishing, stuff. There's tons of things to do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but here in Southern California, I just think it's just such a melt. I hate that word too. It's just like so many people from so many different areas with so many different interests. There are diehard fans of, I would say, well, for a fact, I guess statistically, name a major football school in the United States, and I guarantee you there is a sports bar on Saturday full of that team's alumni and fans going nuts in LA bars.
San Diego too. It is. Man, when I was in San Diego, okay, so there was Moondoggies, and then there was the PB Bar and Grill. They were literally right next to each other. That was the Ohio State bar and the Michigan bar. Up the road, there was what was it called? The Tavern. That was a Virginia Tech bar. Yes, a Virginia Tech bar. There was an all Boston bar on that same street. There was a I'm forgetting one more major program. My God, Notre Dame. There was another, all on the same street. So like go back to your point. It's like, it's all about the brands, and there's like a representation. But I think what gets kind of confusing though is like, you just don't see that among the actual California programs. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but like, where else in the country, like say for instance, could you go to New York City on a Saturday for the USC Notre Dame game and to see a bar full of USC fans or grads?
So let me try to understand your point. Your point is, because I think of it as USC having a majority of fans from LA. But what it sounds like is there is a bunch of fans that have a small slice of the pie, and individually they don't make a whole lot up. But if you add all the little slices together, they would be an overwhelming majority of college football fans in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason's bringing up a good point. I've gone. Matter of fact, I've been back east in New York, and I've gone and watched football games in New York bars, like I was talking about, full of USC alumni and fans. I mean, USC fans are all over. You probably have some annoying neighbors that are USC fans. Some of you guys out there, all over the country. So I mean, it's
to answer your comment, Daryl, based on what Tim said, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like it's somewhere in between. There are more college football fans in Southern California than it may appear by looking at USC and especially UCLA attendance, because there's the migration of all the other college football fans from other parts of the country, but there's still a huge pro component and just a culture that isn't a huge college football culture, but there are more college football fans than there appears to be, but not the concentration that you're going to find in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Yeah, well, there is without a doubt many more pro football fans in Southern California.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Daryl earlier about most of the pro fans, are college fans. That's not the case here. I got guys I work with that are Steeler fans, that are, they're Bronco fans, and they couldn't tell me, who won the national championship last year.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
They
that's
probably
going a little far,
care.
but they know nothing about the Georgia team at all.
They probably only care about the draft selection portion of it in terms of who looks like a first
what's
pick.
funny? When I lived out west, I lived there from parts of 03 all the way to end of 08. So I kind of lived there back and forth between here and Ohio. But who do you think the most represented team in terms of a major college football team that I saw in Southern California at that time, Tim? Who do you think?
What year?
Between 03 and 08.
Miami?
Texas.
Well, there's a lot of Texas people.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I went to USC,
because you would see so many big rig truck, or not big rig, but like big like dually truck or just whatever jacked up trucks, and you saw Longhorns stickers everywhere. And plus, they were in 05, they were coming off the Natty, and so you know what I mean. So Texas fans were everywhere in Southern California.
See, to me, this is fascinating because I understand a lot of people move to LA, but I figure just the population base of LA and the people birthed into USC fandom would have outweighed the people coming in. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
Right. Well, you also understand too, man, like one thing, like baseball, Major League Baseball, in my opinion, was more popular than college football there. Like the San Diego Padres, even when they were playing in Qualcomm and then now at Petco, they had great crowds, even when they were a bad team.
Well,
then,
I would say
high school baseball, like even college baseball, I would go to San Diego State baseball games.
I would say that baseball was more popular nationally than college football up until probably about 20 years ago.
But I'm saying in terms of the interest, though, I mean, the crowds, California crowds or like attendance was still among the top 10. Like just take away Oakland, the A's had good attendance. Especially during those World Series time, the Dodgers always good attendance. The Padres, when they built the new stadium, excellent attendance. The Giants, that beautiful ballpark, always great attendance. So baseball is a huge deal in California.
Yeah, well, baseball is huge, and a lot of your baseball players come from Southern California is a hotbed for baseball as well.
Yeah.
So Texas, Southern California. So baseball's always been big since I was a kid, and it still is really, really big here in Southern California. But it's just I'm glad we've had this conversation because there's so many misconceptions about Southern California fans, and look, the Rose Bowl's empty, so obviously, clearly, there's no fans there. Hey, look, the Coliseum only has 65,000.
Yeah,
clearly, no one likes football in LA, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way. They're very picky fans.
And it's like to your point to the big city, man. It's like you brought up Northwestern, Chicago, right? Watch a Michigan Northwestern game when Michigan plays in Evanston. It's all maize and blue because there's a huge base of Michigan alumni right there in Chicago. Go watch a Michigan Northwestern game. It's 95% Michigan fans.
I can't remember when it was Nebraska or Wisconsin, but one of them came out to the Rose Bowl one time. And I'm not talking about the Rose Bowl. I think it was like just a regular season game against UCLA, and it was all red.
Yeah.
It was such a bad look. And this year for the SC UCLA game, they tarped off whole sections of the Rose Bowl because USC fans, obviously, we're having a great year. We knew we thought we were to kick their ass. They gave us a great game. And they were just everyone, they said, sorry, we're sold out. They weren't sold out. They tarped off huge sections of their stadium, so it wouldn't be a majority USC football team players or fans. All right, you guys.
Okay.
I'm
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm wound
when
up.
you all joined the Big Ten in USC and UCLA, should college football fans in general expect the Rose Bowl and stuff to be like sold out more? Because or have more attendance because you're going to have teams like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State.
I'm thinking UCLA is not going to make this move if they're going to continue to run their program the way they have in the past. I think this is a great, like Mark was saying, this is a great opportunity for them to reinvent themselves. They have all the intangibles. The UC system is just insanely great to begin with. They have a history, believe it or not, of NFL players. They have been strong. When they're good, they're really good. I'm hoping not too good, but I'm thinking just recently USC under Lynn Swann and Pat Hayden and the program. So we got hit by NCAA sanctions, but really then for the next 6 or 7 years, USC was self-sanctioning with just not putting any money. They weren't waking up to what college football began. College football and was started in the SEC and in the Midwest became big time business. If you got to invest in your program, you got to put new facilities up. You have to invest in support staffs, recruiting staffs. You have to spend tons of money. And some schools, especially Pac-12 schools, had their noses up in the air about academics or whatever, and they were refusing to keep up with the times. And you saw what happened. You saw what happened to the Pac-12.
Mhm.
They weren't keeping up when they came in. One thing, and that, by the way, that's one of the major reasons why Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma. And he's never come out and said it, but all the people that we heard in Matt Zemek's great work and when he's talking to Oklahoma Insider was the fact that he kept asking for this, because he's probably pointing to Athens, probably pointing to Columbus, saying, look at all the stuff they have. Look at the support staff they have. Look at the facilities they have at these places. This is what I want. I want this much for my assistants. I want this, these guys on my staff. I want to catch up to 2020 college football. And they slow played him. He said, and then I'm sure Mike Bone walked in and said, through the back channels, heard that he's not happy. He said, here's a blank check. What do you want? Let's win some football. And
Right.
that's exactly what that's the reality of what happened.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up too, that the rest of the Pac-12, it hasn't really caught up, because that kind of brings us back to what you and I were discussing much earlier tonight. I just don't think Cal and Stanford would be a good addition to the Big Ten, because what do they have to offer other than an academic prestige? They neither are in major media markets. None of them are competitive or bring anything into the revenue sports. Their bread and butter is the non-revenue sports. I just don't see how they would add any value to the Big Ten other than an academic prestige.
But you're downplaying that too much.
Why?
You're talking about
Absolutely.
Stanford and Cal, two of the premier research institutions
But
in the world.
right, but what do they bring other than that, though? I mean, you got to look at big picture.
That's like saying, I'm trying to come up with an analogy.
But they brought in that Baltimore DC market, and Rutgers brought in that New York market.
But from a monetary standpoint, that pales in comparison to what Tim's talking about in regards to research and endowments.
You're talking billions.
But doesn't Oregon do the same thing? Isn't Oregon a bigger brand and will bring more to them?
No. Oregon is nowhere. Matter of fact, you heard that noise, that thump. That was probably some Stanford grad falling over when you compared Oregon as a research. Matter of fact, Oregon probably on the bottom of the research.
Obviously, Stanford is a way better academic institution than Oregon. That was not the point I was trying to make. The point I was saying more big picture as a brand. Like what does Stanford and Cal bring from a brand standpoint athletically?
International, okay, athletically, well, we just talked about it. Stanford. So you're right. You're talking about revenue sports, but if you're talking about collegiate athletics, Stanford is just up at the top. But not just women's volleyball, whatever, but in baseball. There wasn't too long ago they had Montgomery, where they had great basketball programs.
It's only been 10 years ago that Stanford was going to Rose Bowl. It's not like they can't win in football.
Yeah. Right, but they don't travel. I mean, they don't even fill. Even when they were going to competing for Rose Bowls, they were half filling their stadium.
Yeah, and everything you say is valid, but it's insignificant compared to the things that Tim outlined academically.
But see, Mark, this goes back to Cal fans are not going to travel to Columbus. They're not going to go to Ann Arbor. They're not going to go to.
Nobody needs them to travel to Columbus or Ann Arbor.
Those are peanuts,
point, though. I mean, but like, why not bring in a Oregon or like a North Carolina where their fans would, where they're a little more?
Because can I jump in? Because how much are those gate revenue going to be each year?
Yeah,
if they traveled well. Now, how much will adding an institution like Stanford and Cal, and we're talking about the prestige. It's not like the Big Ten needs help with academic prestige, right? With the universities they have. But I have to say, even with the big hitters you have in the Big Ten, adding Cal and Stanford would raise eyebrows to even the most academics of the academics in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I understand that, but like that was the whole idea with Maryland and Rutgers, and
we're comparing
it wasn't the whole idea.
Absolutely.
Maryland and Rutgers was all about cable households.
In terms of a brand, from terms outside of athletics, was the point you're getting at. It's what I'm getting at. The perception, look, Rutgers, obviously, I know Stanford is the best academic school of all these guys. I get that, but I'm just saying,
you just have to step out of
and brand. Like, you cannot just. I know Stanford's a great school, but they don't bring anything else.
Yes, they do.
No, not compared to other.
First of all, it doesn't really matter because they're so overwhelmingly of a status in academically that it doesn't really matter. And then, as Tim just mentioned, athletically in the non-revenue sports, they have historically been the best school in the country and are still one of the top schools in the country in non-revenue sports. And just 8 to 10 years ago, they were going to Rose Bowls and playing in Pac-12 championship games in football on a regular basis. They're not that far removed from being a football power.
But what have they done since? I mean, we've seen them steadily decline. And to Tim's point,
what's that have to do with anything? If we just went by record, does Texas belong to the SEC? Does that make a sound move from a record standpoint?
But from a
record standpoint, we're talking about success on the football field. Why would the SEC want Texas? They suck.
I'm talking more
5-7 2 years ago. They're horrible.
The commitment standpoint is the point I'm making. That Stanford and Cal are committed, and Tim just made that point. So why would we take?
So I'm with you. I hear what you're saying.
Programs that aren't committed.
I hear what you're saying, and you're making valid points. But what Mark and I are trying to say, and really, I'm just kind of cheating off of what Tony taught me, is the fact that when you look at the Big Ten has the largest TV contract of all the conferences, right?
Yes.
That TV contract and the money each university gets from that TV contract, because I mean, turnstiles are even smaller than the TV contract. It's literally insignificant. It's that we're talking dollars. At the end of the day, these aren't NFL franchises. These are universities.
Yeah.
And the university, their idea is academics. And really, if you're a big hitter, you're a research institution, and you're talking about research and research dollars and sharing libraries, et cetera, down the line. And so being affiliated with these other universities is going to be an absolute coup for adding USC and UCLA, academically is also helpful to them. But if you're talking next level with Cal, I can't believe this hurts me to say this. Next level with Cal and Stanford academics, that's a whole nother ball game. Mm-hmm. And for the non-revenue sports, the Pac-12 used to be the Conference of Champions, right? Because they had the most team championships with USC, UCLA, and Stanford. Actually, Stanford, UCLA, USC in that order for total championships. Pretty close, all with well over 100 each. Overnight, by adding USC and UCLA, now the Big Ten is the Conference of Champions with the most. If you added Stanford, it would be lights out. It wouldn't even be close. So to say why they adding them, you're just looking just at football and say, well, that's why our conference is just going to look at how many butts can you put in the seat. And I think you have to broaden what you're talking about. University presidents, and what are they thinking about? They're not just thinking about how well does your team travel. They're saying how many billions do you bring in annually in revenue for your research. You know?
Right.
And
guys,
the Rod Farva, we can even discuss this in your realm in terms of what you're talking about and completely dismiss the academic portion of the conversation. Look at Rutgers football stadium. Look at Northwestern's football stadium. Look at Maryland's football stadium on a Saturday afternoon. Illinois' football stadium. So Stanford and Cal bring all that other stuff athletically in the non-revenue sports and endowments and in research and in prestige academically, all that. And they bring football programs that are similar to 4 or 5 already in the Big Ten.
I've agreed with that whole point, that whole thing. I've never disagreed. My main point is the commitment of the athletic departments and what do they bring.
Football. You mean football departments, not athletics, because they excel
athletics as in terms of revenue. Okay, like football and basketball. Like, what do they bring? Are they committed? I mean, he even
they
said
bring as much as Rutgers, Illinois, Northwestern do.
But I understand.
And actually, Stanford has shown us just in the last 10 years that they can be a top 5 football program, and they sustained that for 5, 6, 7 years.
But I mean,
they've shown more than Illinois, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern.
What were they doing before
all those
Harbaugh?
Schools have.
But what were they doing before Harbaugh, and what were they doing maybe 3-4 years after Harbaugh left?
Well, they had a bad 7 or 8 year stretch, but before that, they were going to Rose Bowls. They went to Rose Bowls in the 70s. They went to Rose Bowls in the 90s. There are far worse football products in the Big Ten than what Stanford has been over the last 40 years.
Absolutely. But like, I just don't see, a bunch of people like getting really excited to watch Michigan play Stanford, or
who's excited to see. You don't.
But I'm saying, so your point is who's excited to watch Rutgers? You're absolutely right. So why add more programs at that level?
Because you've got Stanford and Cal academically.
But Mark, I understand, but I'm trying to look at more big picture outside of
no. We're looking big picture.
No, Mark, I've acknowledged over and over. I acknowledge the academic prestige. Stanford is at the top, one of the top universities on the planet. I acknowledge that, but I'm just saying, if they're not going to be fully committed, like he's even said, they refuse to keep up. He's even said
I was talking, bear with me. So people have to realize one thing also. I hear this a lot. This is a big thing on these talk shows. People think that if a school does one thing, they're always going to be that. If the coach does one thing, they're always going to be that kind of coach. Things are dynamic. Things are fluid. I'm not saying it happens, but I would make some assumptions that if Stanford wanted to join the Big Ten, I think they're going to commit on the field as well. But Stanford is a different animal. They won't. They have very strict requirements for their players, So how competitive they can be, it depends on their coach, right? Mm-hmm. It depends what they're doing. I think they would, if they join. They wouldn't join the Big Ten if they weren't committed to playing football. They don't want to go and be embarrassed. I think Tony even said there's a good chance you're right that maybe they say, if the Pac-12 closes up, then we'll just stop playing football, because that's how big their university is. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Imagine a school like, I'm not picking on Alabama, but imagine Alabama saying, you know what? We're just going to stop playing football. Could you imagine that in a million, even a great academic university? By the way, Alabama is, because of how well they're doing in football, their academics are going through the roof as well. But imagine like Notre Dame, as great as they are as an academic institution, saying, we just won't play football anymore. That's fine. Right. These things would happen, but they're so big. They're like almost, the Ivy don't want to admit it, but they're right there with the Ivy schools.
After USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten, my next video was go get Stanford and Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, obviously I want Notre Dame.
Actually, I forget what actually I said Cal too, but anyway, we need to wrap things up. But
Okay,
we
one more
appreciate
question,
everybody.
and I'll end it. I swear to
Yes.
God. I swear,
30-second answer.
Okay. All right, Tim. Who would you rather have? Who do you think would be a better fit as a whole to the Big Ten? Stanford or Duke, and why?
Stanford or Duke?
Oh, yes.
I mean, when I think of Duke, the only thing I can think, I know they're amazing academic institutes, but they're not. So if we're talking academics, Stanford hands down. If we're talking athletics,
the overall brand.
I'm taking Stanford.
All right, we'll continue later. Mark's cutting us off.
Yes, should have
All
done
right,
that
guys,
a long
good time.
time ago.
And then we'd have
appreciate you
all
being here.
of Notre Dame's rivals all in one conference. That's another reason to bring in Stanford.
There's a ton of reasons. It's a slam dunk. Stanford should be in the Big Ten. I just think.
I think it happens, Mark. I think it does. I think
Yeah.
it does actually happen.
All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. DeReal, thank you. Tim, thank you. If we don't see you before Sunday, everybody catch Tim and Rick Sunday, 5 Pacific on the USC channel. And we'll be doing Nebraska football here on a watch party on the Nebraska channel at 2 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, right here at the Voice of College Football. And join the Voice of College Football community with a YouTube membership. Do that today.
Take care, guys.
See you guys.